The evening I taught my entitled mother-in-law that my marriage wasn't hers to control. I'm 33F, and I've been dealing with my mother-in-law Linda's boundary issues since the day I married her son David, also 33. From the start, she made it clear she saw me as competition for his attention. She'd show up at our apartment unannounced, let herself in with the key David had given her years ago, and critique everything from my cooking to how I folded his laundry. The worst part was, she'd constantly call me Rebecca, David's ex-girlfriend from college. When I'd correct her, she'd give this innocent little laugh like it was just a silly mistake. David always had the same response. That's just how Mom is. She means well. I tried to believe him for a while. Things escalated 6 months ago when we bought our first house. It was a fixer-upper in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. We were excited about making it our own space. Linda had other ideas. The helping started immediately. We came home from work one Tuesday to find she'd replaced the kitchen curtains I'd picked out with some floral thing she'd found on sale. When I asked her about it, she said mine were too dark, and she was just trying to brighten the place up. David said it wasn't worth arguing over curtains. Then she rearranged our furniture. Then she threw out family photos from my side because they clashed with the aesthetic she was going for. That one actually bothered David a little, but when she cried and said she was just trying to help us make the house beautiful, he caved. He told me I was being too sensitive, that she was getting older and just wanted to feel useful. I should mention that Linda is 61 and in perfect health. She volunteers at 3 different organizations and runs a book club. The Poor Old Woman Act was exactly that, an act. The final straw came 3 weeks ago. David and I both work full-time, so we're gone during the day. We came home on a Thursday evening, both exhausted, and I immediately knew something was wrong. The living room looked completely different. She'd let herself in and redecorated. Without asking. Without even mentioning she was planning to do it. The walls we'd spent 2 weekends painting a soft blue were now beige. Our comfortable sectional sofa that we'd saved up for was gone. Actually gone, and replaced with a stiff formal couch from her house. Our artwork was in a pile in the garage. She'd even rearranged our bookshelves. I stood there in shock while David called her. She answered cheerfully, saying she wanted to surprise us with a more mature living space. She'd hired movers and everything. Our sofa was at a donation center. That's when something in me snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I went completely calm, which, if you know me, is when I'm actually at my angriest. David was on the phone with his mother trying to reason with her. He kept saying she should have asked first and that this wasn't really appropriate, but she just talked over him about how ungrateful we were being. I walked to the kitchen, pulled out my laptop, and started searching for locksmiths. Found one that could come first thing in the morning, booked it. Then I drafted a message to Linda. David hung up looking defeated. He started saying something about how we should just repaint the walls and maybe we could get our couch back from the donation center. I cut him off and told him no. This ends now. I showed him what I'd written. Linda, thank you for your interest in our home. However, your interior design services are no longer required. Going forward, please ring the doorbell like a guest when you visit. We will let you know when it's a good time. He read it twice. I watched his face change as it sank in what I was actually saying. Then he asked if I really wanted to send this to his mother. I told him I'd already called a locksmith for tomorrow morning, and I was changing every lock in this house. That's when we had the fight. Not a screaming match exactly, but the most serious conversation we'd had in our 5 years of marriage. David said I was overreacting, that his mom was just trying to help, that I was going to cause a huge family issue over nothing. I told him it wasn't nothing. I walked him through every single incident over the past 3 years. The unannounced visits, the constant criticism, the calling me Rebecca, the key she'd copied without our permission, the complete violation of entering our home and removing our belongings. She threw out my grandmother's photo, She gave away the couch we bought together. She painted over the walls we spent our anniversary weekend working on. I asked him when it stops being just how she is and starts being a problem. Something clicked. Maybe it was seeing it all laid out at once. Maybe it was realizing that his mother had literally broken into our house. But David finally got quiet and told me to change the locks. I sent the message that night. The locksmith came at 8 in the morning. By 9, every exterior door had new locks, and only David and I had keys. Linda showed up at 2 like she always did on Fridays. I watched from the window as she tried her key, then tried it again, then started knocking, confused. When I opened the door, she had this smile that disappeared the second she saw my face. She said her key didn't work. I told her I knew, and that I'd had the locks changed. What happened next was spectacular in the worst way. She demanded to know why. I calmly repeated what I'd said in the message, that she needed to call before visiting from now on. She tried to push past me into the house. I blocked her. That's when she lost it. Started yelling on our front porch about how ungrateful and disrespectful I was, how she'd only been trying to help, how David would never stand for this. The neighbors were definitely watching. David came to the door. She immediately switched to crying, saying I'd locked her out of her son's life. And my husband, who had spent 3 years telling me to just let it go, told her that she'd entered our house without permission and got rid of our belongings. That's not helping, he said. That's controlling. He said I was right and that she needed to call before coming over. The crying stopped. She stared at him like he'd slapped her and asked if he was taking my side. He said he was protecting his marriage. She left without another word. That was 3 weeks ago. Linda hasn't visited once, though not for lack of trying at first. She called David 17 times the night after the lock incident. He didn't answer. She sent a long text about how hurt she was, how she'd raised him better than to treat his mother this way, how I'd clearly turned him against her. He responded with one line, telling her we'd talk when she was ready to respect our boundaries. The next week, David's aunt called, then his cousin, then 3 of Linda's friends from church, all saying the same thing, that I was being cruel, that Linda was just a mother who loved her son, that I should be grateful someone cared enough to help fix up our house. David shut it down every time. He kept telling them this wasn't about me, and that his mom had crossed a line. I won't lie. There were moments I wondered if I'd gone too far, if I should have tried one more conversation before changing the locks. But then I'd remember standing in our living room, looking at beige walls and someone else's furniture, and feeling like a stranger in my own house. 2 days ago, Linda sent a message to both of us. It said she would consider visiting again once we apologized for embarrassing her in front of the neighbors and acknowledged how much she'd sacrificed to help us. David deleted it without responding. Our house is quiet now. We repainted the living room, a warm gray this time, something we both picked. We found a couch we love. I hung my grandmother's photo back up in a place of honor. David seems lighter somehow. He admitted last week that he'd been anxious every time he left for work, wondering what his mom might do next. He'd just gotten so used to managing her feelings that he hadn't realized how exhausting it was. His dad called yesterday. First time we've heard from him through this whole thing. He said Linda is telling everyone we've banned her from the house. David corrected him and said she's welcome to visit when she calls first like anyone else would. His dad sighed and said Linda doesn't see herself as anyone else. She's having a hard time accepting that David is actually a grown man with his own family now. That might be the truest thing anyone said about this situation. Some of David's relatives still think I'm the villain here, that I should have been more patient, more understanding, that I destroyed a mother-son relationship over home decor. But I don't think they get it. This was never about curtains or paint colors. This was about Linda refusing to accept that her son had a life that she wasn't the center of. We haven't heard from Linda in a week. No calls, no texts, no flying monkeys sent to plead her case. David says she's probably waiting for us to crack first, to be the ones who reach out and apologize. We're not going to. I sometimes wonder if she'll ever actually accept the boundaries, or if this is just how things are now. A permanent standoff where she refuses to visit and we refuse to pretend her behavior was acceptable. But honestly, after everything, I'm okay with that. Our home is finally ours. How I exposed my grandfather's secret will and shattered the family illusion. I, 28, never expected to become the family villain for doing what I thought was right. My grandfather, 84 when he passed, was the undisputed patriarch of our family. My mom, Sarah, 52, was his only daughter among 3 children. My uncles, Robert, 56, and Thomas, 54, had always been the golden sons. Then there were us grandkids. Robert's kids Mark, 31, and Jessica, 29, who could do no wrong, and me and my sister Emma, 24, who were basically furniture at family gatherings. Growing up, the favoritism was obvious, but we all just accepted it. Grandfather built his fortune in real estate, starting with one rental property and ending with a portfolio worth millions. He was the kind of man who believed sons carried the family legacy, and daughters were meant to marry well. Still, when he got sick with cancer 2 years ago, it wasn't his precious sons who showed up. It was my mom, driving him to chemo 3 times a week, managing his medications, cooking his meals, and sleeping on his couch when he had bad nights. Robert and Thomas? They'd drop by once a month, usually when they needed something signed. The will reading happened 2 weeks after the funeral at Robert's law office. I remember the mahogany conference table, the smell of leather chairs, and Robert's barely concealed smirk as he read through the documents. Thomas got the commercial properties downtown. Robert got the rental properties in the suburbs, plus the vacation home in Florida. Their kids each got trust funds worth 6 figures, and Mark specifically got grandfather's collection of classic cars. My mom? She got his old Rolex. That's it. A watch worth maybe $5,000 if she was lucky. Robert had the audacity to pat her shoulder and say, Dad knew Sarah had her husband's support. He wanted to ensure the family name and legacy stayed with the sons. My mom just nodded, eyes wet, clutching that watch box like it was made of gold. Emma and I weren't even mentioned, which honestly didn't surprise me. But watching my mom try to smile while her brothers counted their millions made my stomach turn. 3 weeks later, I was helping Mom clean out grandfather's study. She couldn't face it alone, kept breaking down every time she found his handwriting on something. We were trying to move his massive oak desk when I noticed it had a locked drawer. After 20 minutes of searching, I found a small key taped under the desk lamp base. Inside the drawer was a manila envelope marked Final Draft, notarized, with an official seal. My hands were shaking as I opened it. What I found inside would destroy everything our family thought we knew about my grandfather's final wishes. The document inside that envelope changed everything. It was another will, dated 3 weeks after the one Robert had read to us. This one split everything equally between Robert, Thomas, and my mom. All the properties, all the money, everything divided into perfect thirds. There was even a handwritten note in grandfather's shaky writing. Sarah deserves no less than her brothers. She gave the most. My first thought was that this had to be fake, but the more I examined it, the more legitimate it looked. The signatures matched grandfather's other documents perfectly. The notary seal was real, with witness signatures from 2 names I recognized from grandfather's church. All 6 grandkids were supposed to get equal trust funds, too. Emma and I were specifically named this time. I spent the next week investigating quietly. called the notary office pretending to be confirming an appointment detail for my grandfather's estate. They confirmed he'd been there on that exact date, mentally sharp, and had finalized his will. The receptionist even mentioned how he'd insisted on reading it twice before signing. Then I found his appointment book in the study with an entry, "Update will with Johnson. Final." The most damning evidence came from grandfather's old computer. Buried in his email was a message from Robert sent 2 days before that final will was signed. "Dad, we need to discuss your recent changes. This isn't what we agreed on." There were 3 missed calls from Robert on grandfather's phone log the day he went to the notary. I knew Robert had filed the old will just 2 days after grandfather died. As the executor and a lawyer himself, he had immediate access to all the documents. He knew exactly what he was doing. I made copies of everything at 3 different places, paranoid that something might happen to the evidence. Scanned everything into multiple cloud accounts, too. Then I called a lawyer friend from college who specialized in estate law. She took one look at the documents and told me this was serious fraud if Robert knew about the newer will. The next part was probably petty, but I wanted maximum impact. I sent copies via certified mail to every single person named in both wills, timed to arrive on the same day. Everyone except Robert. I included a letter explaining how I'd found the document and suggested they might want to consult their own lawyers. Thomas called me within 2 hours of delivery, screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. He wasn't angry at me, though. He was furious at Robert. My mom just sat at her kitchen table, staring at the will, tears streaming down her face. She kept touching grandfather's handwritten note, tracing the words with her finger. By that evening, Robert was calling everyone, claiming the newer will was forged, that grandfather wasn't in his right mind, that I was trying to destroy the family. But the damage was done. The legal battle that followed was brutal. Thomas immediately hired an attorney and demanded a full investigation. Robert tried to claim the newer will was created under duress, that grandfather was confused in his final weeks. But the forensic document examiner confirmed both wills were authentic, and the notary testified that grandfather was completely lucid during their appointment. She even mentioned how Robert had called her office multiple times after grandfather's death, asking strange questions about their procedures. The court froze all the assets that had already been distributed. Mark had to return the cars he'd already started selling. Jessica had to halt her house purchase. Robert's law license was suspended pending investigation for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. The prosecutor said he could face actual jail time. The family explosion was worse than any legal drama. Robert's wife, Helen, left him after 28 years of marriage. She told my mom she'd suspected Robert was shady, but never had proof until now. The cousins split down the middle. Jessica actually thanked me for uncovering the truth, saying she'd rather have less money than live with stolen inheritance. Mark, on the other hand, called me a jealous piece of shit who destroyed his father's life over money that wasn't even mine. 6 months later, the court ruled in favor of the newer will. Everything had to be redistributed according to grandfather's actual final wishes. Robert lost his law practice, his reputation, and most of his family. He's facing criminal charges that could result in up to 5 years in prison. My mom got her third of the estate, but she ended up donating a huge chunk to the cancer center where grandfather received treatment. She said the money felt tainted now. Thomas and my mom are slowly rebuilding their relationship. He admitted he'd heard grandfather mention changing the will several times in those final months, but Robert always convinced him to wait and think about it. The hospice nurse came forward during the investigation and confirmed grandfather had been frustrated about Robert's interference, though she hadn't understood what he meant at the time. I found one last thing while going through grandfather's papers for the lawyers, a journal entry from a week before he died. Must ensure fairness before it's too late. Sarah deserves better. He knew what he wanted. Robert just made sure it didn't happen. Now family gatherings don't exist anymore. Thanksgiving this year was just me, Emma, and Mom. Christmas will probably be the same. Half the relatives think I'm a hero for exposing the truth. The other half say I destroyed the family over money I wasn't even getting, that I should have respected what they call grandfather's original wishes. My mom says she wishes I'd never found that will, that she'd rather have kept the family intact than have the money. But then she'll look at that handwritten note from grandfather, saying she deserved no less than her brothers, and cry all over again. How I turned my narcissistic mother's birthday party into her public downfall. 1. 34. Have spent my entire life watching my mother, Linda, 62, destroy everything she touches while smiling for the cameras. To everyone else, she's this amazing woman who volunteers at the food bank and organizes charity drives. To me, my sister Maya, 29, and my brother Chris, 26. She's the reason we all needed therapy. Growing up, nothing was ever good enough unless she could take credit for it. When I got a full scholarship to college, she told everyone at church that it only happened because she pushed me so hard. When Maya's marriage fell apart 2 years ago, Mom told our relatives that she failed because I didn't raise her to know how to keep a man happy. Maya hasn't spoken to her since. Chris still lives at home, and I can see how beaten down he is every time I visit. 2 months ago, I got the invitation to her grand 62nd birthday celebration at the country club. It wasn't really an invitation, more like a summons. The card literally said it was time for the family to come together and put aside childish grudges. She made sure to mention Maya specifically, like she was doing her some kind of favor by allowing her to attend. I almost said no. Then Maya called me crying. She said Mom had been texting her constantly, guilt-tripping her about the party, and she knew Mom was planning to humiliate her in front of everyone. That's when something clicked. I'd been saving screenshots and recordings for years without really knowing why. Text messages where Mom called me a disappointment. Voice memos where she laughed about how all her kids were failures. Messages to aunts and uncles where she made up complete lies about Maya having addiction problems just to explain the divorce. I told Maya I'd go to the party. Then I told Mom I wanted to make a tribute video for her. She absolutely loved that idea. Of course she did. More attention on her. The next 6 weeks, I worked on 2 versions. The decoy was full of happy family photos and generic messages about what a wonderful mother she was. The real one started the same way, then gradually showed who she actually is. Screenshots of her cruelest texts. Recordings of the things she said when she thought no one was listening. Maya sent me everything she had. Even Chris, who's terrified of Mom, secretly gave me access to recent recordings from the house. I kept telling myself I could back out. Right up until the week before the party when Mom called me every single day with new demands, each call reminding me exactly why I was doing this. The party was exactly what you'd expect. Expensive country club, at least 80 people, decorations everywhere. Mom was in her element, playing the perfect hostess. I watched her hug Maya at the door while whispering something that made my sister's face go pale. Later, Maya told me it was, "Try not to embarrass me tonight." I set up the laptop myself, told the venue staff I'd handle the AV equipment. I had the decoy slideshow pulled up on screen, but the real file ready to go. Mom spent the whole night working the room, telling everyone how blessed she was to have such a loving family. Several people came up to me saying how inspiring she was. I just smiled and nodded. Then came her speech about family being everything and unconditional love. I looked over at Maya, standing alone in the corner looking miserable, and Chris already 3 drinks deep. Mom finished by announcing that her wonderful eldest child had prepared a special tribute. Before I hit play, I caught Maya's eye. She gave me the smallest nod. The first 90 seconds were normal. Family photos, some vacations, people were smiling. Then came my college graduation photo with text overlay of Mom's actual message. She only got in because I pushed her. She's always been lazy. You could feel the confusion spreading. Next was Maya's wedding photo, followed by Mom's voice recording saying she gave the marriage 2 years because Maya was too selfish to make it work. The room went completely silent. Then the screenshots started coming faster. Mom calling me a disappointment who would never amount to anything. Messages to relatives making up stories about Maya's fake addiction problems. Texts about Chris being too embarrassing to be seen with because of his weight. Then the worst one, a recording of Mom laughing with a friend. My children are my biggest failures, but at least I look good trying to fix them. Mom's face went from shock to pure rage. She tried to grab the laptop, but I'd already closed it. She started stammering about context and cruel jokes, but Maya stood up and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Every word is real. We all know it." People started leaving in waves. Some confronted Mom on their way out. Others just avoided eye contact. Her best friend from church, who'd been mentioned in some of those messages, walked right past her without a word. My dad, who'd only come for us kids, stopped to tell me he was sorry he never protected us from her. Then Mom completely lost it. Started screaming that I was an ungrateful bitch, all the pretense gone. The country club manager had to ask us to leave. As I walked out, she yelled that we were all dead to her. The next morning I had 47 missed calls from Mom. The texts went from threats to playing victim and back again. But I also had messages from my siblings and a few relatives saying they always suspected something was off. Maya texted me that she could breathe for the first time in years. Chris asked if he could stay with me because Mom kicked him out that morning. He said he didn't even care, that he was done. Mom immediately launched into damage control on social media, posted about how her mentally ill child orchestrated a vicious attack on a loving mother. Some relatives believed her, but most just went silent. The interesting part was her church friends and volunteer organizations. They started distancing themselves, especially the ones who'd seen their own names in those messages. 2 organizations quietly asked her to step down. In our family group chat without Mom, we talked about going no contact. Maya said Mom was begging to talk and would explain everything. I told her not to fall for it, that Mom would apologize just enough to get her back, then use the forgiveness as proof she was the victim. We've seen that pattern too many times. I won't lie, I've had moments of doubt. There were good times with Mom, rare but real, and sometimes I wonder if public humiliation was too far. My therapist keeps asking if I feel guilty, and honestly, it depends on the day. But then I remember that nothing else ever worked. Being kind didn't work. Setting boundaries didn't work. She never faced real consequences before. Chris started therapy and told me he'd been afraid of her his whole life, that he didn't know you could just stop being afraid. It's been 2 weeks now. Mom sent a lawyer letter yesterday threatening to sue me for defamation. But it's an empty threat, since everything I showed was documented truth. The extended family is split down the middle, half supporting me and half saying family business should stay private. 2 of my cousins reached out saying they'd experienced similar things with Mom and felt validated. Maya got a job interview after years of Mom destroying her confidence. I still haven't blocked Mom's number, and I'm not sure why. There's a voicemail from her that I haven't listened to yet. The preview shows it starts with, "I'm your mother. You owe me." Some days I think I went too far. Other days I think it was the only language she'd ever understand. My siblings call me a hero, but heroes don't usually feel this hollow. Mom started a blog about being a victim of elder abuse, and it's actually gaining traction. A reporter called yesterday, wanting both sides of the story. I guess we'll see where this goes. It all started with a missing inheritance, and ended with my uncle's downfall. I'm 28, and I never thought I'd be the guy who takes a family member to court. But life throws you curveballs. When my grandmother passed away about 8 months ago, she left behind a modest inheritance. Nothing crazy, maybe $15,000 for each of us, but enough that I could have knocked out a decent chunk of my student loans. The plan was simple: split it between her 3 kids and 5 grandkids. Fair and straightforward. My Uncle Dave, 56, jumped at the chance to handle everything. He's her eldest son and worked in finance for 20 years, always going on about investment strategies at family dinners. My mom, his younger sister, seemed relieved someone else was dealing with the paperwork. My Aunt Linda didn't question it either. None of us did, really. Dave was the financially literate one. We trusted him. That turned out to be a massive mistake. The first month after the funeral, nobody brought it up. We were grieving, and asking about money felt wrong. But by month 2, I was getting antsy. Student loan payments don't pause for grief. I asked my mom if she'd heard anything. She said Dave mentioned the bank was being slow with releasing funds. Legal stuff, normal delays. Month 3 came around and my cousin Jake asked about it in the family group chat. Dave's response was almost word for word the same. Something about tax confusion and probate taking longer than expected. He sounded irritated that we were even asking, like we were being disrespectful to Grandma's memory by caring about the money. But here's the thing. I work in HR, and part of my job involves handling legal documentation and benefit claims. I know what normal processing times look like. This wasn't adding up. The excuses were too vague, too convenient. My gut was screaming that something was off. So I did what Dave probably never expected anyone to do. I contacted the estate lawyer directly. 3 days later, she called me back. She sounded confused by my questions. The funds were released 2 months ago, she said. Everything was transferred to Dave's account as the executor. He was supposed to distribute it to all of us. I felt my stomach drop. 2 months ago. That meant he'd had our money for over 3 months while feeding us lies about bank delays and legal issues. I asked for documentation. She sent me copies of everything: the will, the release forms, the bank transfer confirmations. It was all there in black and white. Grandma's will clearly laid out how the money should be divided, and the lawyer's notes showed Dave had confirmed he understood his responsibility. I sat at my kitchen table staring at those documents, feeling this weird mix of anger and disbelief. This was my uncle, the guy who taught me how to ride a bike, and he'd stolen from all of us without blinking. I needed to know what he'd done with the money before saying anything. So I went through his social media, which felt weird but necessary. His Facebook was suddenly full of posts I hadn't paid attention to before. A brand new Audi in his driveway from April. A beach vacation in May that looked like the Bahamas. Posts about his exciting new business venture in some multi-level marketing scheme selling overpriced supplements. He hadn't invested our inheritance. He'd blown it on himself. I told my mom everything that night. She went silent for so long I thought the call dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice was shaking, but she wanted to confront him immediately. I convinced her to wait so we could tell everyone at once. The next day, I arranged a family meeting at my mom's house. Everyone except Dave. When I showed them what I'd found, the room exploded. My Aunt Linda started yelling about what a snake he was. Jake punched the wall. My cousin Emma just sat there looking devastated. She'd been planning to use her share for a down payment on her first apartment. But then when I suggested legal action, everyone went quiet. My mom said he was still her brother and we couldn't take him to court. Linda agreed, saying it would tear the family apart. Maybe we could just talk to him, make him understand he needed to pay us back. I couldn't believe it. He'd been lying to our faces for months, stolen from his own mother's estate, and they wanted to talk it out. But they weren't ready to hear anything else, so I went along with confronting him first. We met Dave at a coffee shop 2 days later. He showed up late, acting casual, but his smile faded when he saw all our faces. My mom asked him straight out where the money was. He started with the same bank processing excuse until I slid the documents across the table. For a second, he looked panicked, but then came the new lies. The money was tied up in investments. He was waiting for the right time to liquidate. He'd made strategic moves that would increase our returns. Jake brought up the Audi and the vacation. Dave's face went red. He admitted he'd used a small portion for personal expenses, but planned to pay it back. The rest was invested, he said. We were overreacting. When Linda asked about the business, he launched into this whole speech about how it would triple our money and we should be thanking him. It was all garbage and we knew it. But watching him lie with such confidence made me realize he actually thought he'd get away with it. He thought we were too scared of making waves to do anything real. The meeting ended with Dave promising to pay everyone within 60 days. 60 days came and went. Nothing. When I texted him, no response. When my mom called, he said there were complications and he needed more time. That was it for me. I compiled everything: estate documents, emails from the lawyer, screenshots of his spending spree, bank statements. I found a lawyer who told me I had a solid case. I filed in small claims court that Friday. I didn't tell the family until after I filed. When I mentioned it in the group chat, my phone exploded. My mom called, begging me to drop it, saying I was going to destroy the family. Linda was less emotional, but said she couldn't sue her own brother. Jake surprised me by being supportive, though. He said someone needed to hold Dave accountable. Dave lost his mind. He sent me this long text about betrayal and family loyalty, how I was being vindictive and Grandma would be ashamed of me. He called me ungrateful and said I was tearing the family apart over money. I read the whole thing and responded with one sentence: "See you in court." The next few weeks were tense. Half the family stopped talking to me. But Emma messaged me after a few days saying she was filing too. She needed that money for her apartment, and he didn't get to steal her future. The court date finally came. I had everything organized in a binder. Dave showed up with nothing but attitude and some half-baked story about investments gone wrong. The judge wasn't having it. She asked him where the documentation was, where the communication with beneficiaries was. All she saw was a clear failure to fulfill his duties as executor. 2 weeks later, the ruling came down. Dave had to pay me my full share plus interest and penalties. It came out to almost $3,000 more than my original amount. But the real domino effect started after that. Within a week, Emma filed. Then Jake. Then my mom, which shocked everyone. She called me before doing it and apologized for not supporting me earlier. Even Linda eventually filed. I think Dave's response to my lawsuit convinced her. Instead of apologizing, he went scorched earth on social media trying to turn people against us. It backfired when everyone realized what he'd actually done. One by one, the cases went through. By the time the last judgment came in, Dave was destroyed. He had to sell the Audi. His house went into foreclosure because he'd taken out a second mortgage for his business. The MLM scheme collapsed. His wife filed for divorce. I saw him at a grocery store a few months ago. We made eye contact, and for a second, I thought he might say something, but he just turned and walked away. He looked older, tired, defeated. Some family relationships never fully recovered. A few relatives still think I went too far, but most of the family sees it differently now. Linda thanked me at Christmas for doing what they were too scared to do. Jake used his inheritance to start his business. Emma moved into her apartment last month and sent me a photo of her keys. When people talk about Grandma now, they don't mention Dave as the smart one anymore. They talk about how his greed became the very thing that buried him. The weird part is, my mom mentioned last month that she's been liking Dave's Facebook posts about rebuilding and second chances. When I asked her about it, she just said he's still her brother. I paid off my loans and got my justice. Dave lost everything. But I'm starting to think that might not actually be the end of this story. Nothing stings like a daughter's payback. I, 28, am a lawyer specializing in estate and inheritance law. But this story starts when I was just a 10-year-old kid, desperate for a mother figure. My mom died when I was 7, and by the time I turned 10, my dad brought Linda home. She was in her early 30s then, beautiful, warm, or at least that's what she wanted everyone to think. The thing about Linda was that she had two faces. Around my dad, she was perfect. She'd ruffle my hair, ask about school, make my favorite meals. But the second he left for work or went to another room, that warmth disappeared. She'd criticize everything I did. My clothes were wrong. My grades weren't good enough. I was too loud or too quiet. I broke things I never touched. Money went missing from her purse, and somehow it was always my fault. I tried telling my dad once, maybe twice. But Linda was smart. She made me sound like a jealous kid who couldn't accept her. My dad would give me these disappointed looks and tell me to give her a chance. So I stopped trying. I just survived. 8 years of that. 8 years of walking on eggshells in my own house. Then my dad died suddenly when I was 18. Heart attack. One day he was fine. The next day he was gone. I was devastated, but I thought at least Linda and I could maybe figure things out. We were both grieving, right? Wrong. Within a week of the funeral, she dropped the act completely. The will reading happened about 2 weeks later. I sat in that lawyer's office expecting to at least get something, maybe enough for college. The house had been my mom's family home originally. I figured Dad would have made sure I had a place to live. But Linda produced a will that left her everything. The house, the savings, even my mom's jewelry and photo albums. Everything that was supposed to be mine. The lawyer looked uncomfortable but said it was all legal and valid. I got a small box of my mom's photos because Linda said she was being generous. I had 2 weeks to move out. No money for college, no safety net, nothing. I moved into a tiny apartment and worked 3 jobs just to survive. Linda sold most of my mom's things at an estate sale. I drove by once and saw strangers walking out with my mother's jewelry box. That's when I decided I'd become a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, one who specialized in estates and inheritance. I'd make sure what happened to me never happened to anyone else. 10 years later, I'm exactly where I planned to be. And that's when Linda's name crossed my desk. My firm took on a case involving a lawsuit about fraudulent estate practices. Nothing unusual. We handle these all the time. I was assigned to review a network of potentially suspicious wills from the past decade. Just routine work, looking for patterns. Except I found one. Elderly men, no close family, sudden marriages to younger women, new wills written right before they died. Everything left to the wives. It happened over and over. And then I saw her name. Linda Martinez, my stepmother. I sat there staring at my computer screen for probably 20 minutes. It wasn't just one case. She was connected to 5 different estates over 15 years. 5 men who had all died and left everything to their recent wives. My dad was number 3. I started digging deeper. Her pattern was always the same. She'd befriend lonely widowers, usually wealthy ones. She'd marry them fast, maybe 6 months after meeting them. Then she'd isolate them from whatever family or friends they had left. New wills would get drafted. Then the husbands would die, sometimes within a year of the marriage. 2 of them died under circumstances that were questioned but never fully investigated. One fell down the stairs. Another had a medication mix-up that caused a fatal reaction. My dad's heart attack suddenly seemed less random. The real breakthrough came when I found the connection to a lawyer who'd been disbarred 3 years ago for forging documents. He'd handled multiple wills in Linda's network, including my father's. I pulled my dad's file. There were 2 wills on record. The one Linda presented that left her everything, and an older one, buried in the archived files. The original will left everything to me. Linda was supposed to get a small trust, enough to be comfortable but not wealthy. The second will, her will, had signatures that a handwriting analyst had flagged as questionable years ago, but no one followed up on it. She'd been planning to rob me before my dad even died. I had to tell the senior partners at my firm. They sat me down and asked if I wanted to recuse myself. Conflict of interest, personal involvement, all of that. But I knew this case better than anyone. I knew how Linda operated because I'd lived through it. They let me stay on the team but kept me behind the scenes. I compiled everything. Every forged signature, every suspicious death, every pattern of manipulation. I handed it all to the investigators and watched them build a case that Linda couldn't talk her way out of. She was arrested 6 weeks later. Multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. All her assets were frozen. I went to her arraignment as part of the legal team. She didn't recognize me at first. It had been 10 years, and I'd changed. But then she looked closer, and her face went completely white. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her the same way she used to stare at me when my dad wasn't looking. Cold, empty, like she was nothing. The legal proceedings dragged on for months. Linda tried to fight it, but the evidence was overwhelming. She was convicted on multiple charges, and all her fraudulently obtained assets were seized. That included everything she'd stolen from my father's estate. The investigation into my dad's will confirmed what I'd found. The document she'd used was forged. The court ruled that I was the rightful heir and had been all along, which meant the house was mine again. After 10 years, I went back there last month. It was empty. All of Linda's stuff had been cleared out during the asset seizure. Walking through those rooms felt surreal. I hadn't been inside since I was 18. Some things looked exactly the same. Other things were completely different. She'd redecorated, erased almost every trace of my mom. They found my mom's heirlooms in a storage unit Linda had been renting. She'd kept them all this time instead of selling them like I thought. I don't know why. Maybe she planned to sell them eventually, or maybe she just wanted to keep them from me. Either way, I have them back now. People keep asking me if I feel satisfied, if this was revenge. Honestly, I don't know what I feel. There's some satisfaction, sure. Linda is serving 8 to 12 years, possibly more as they continue investigating her other victims. She can't hurt anyone else. But it doesn't bring back the time I lost with my dad. It doesn't erase those 8 years of living in that house feeling worthless. I found something while cleaning out the house last week. My dad's real will was hidden in a drawer in his office. There was a letter with it, dated a few months before he died. He wrote that if anything happened to him, he wanted me to know he loved me, that he was proud of me, that he hoped I'd understand why he did things the way he did. Reading it, I think he might have suspected Linda was dangerous. I think he knew something was wrong, but died before he could do anything about it. I haven't decided if I'm keeping the house. Some days I walk through it and feel like I'm home. Other days the walls feel like they're closing in with memories I'd rather forget. Last week, I got contacted by one of Linda's almost victims, an elderly man she'd been seeing right before her arrest. He wanted to meet for coffee to thank me. I showed up yesterday, and he had his daughter with him. She was young, maybe 23. The way she looked at me reminded me of myself at 10 years old, desperate for Linda's approval. It made me wonder if there are others out there like me, kids who Linda pushed aside or damaged. And honestly, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. That afternoon, I exposed my cousin's fake charity and ended her perfect reputation. I, 28, had been watching my cousin, Leah, 31, get praised for years, while something in my gut kept screaming that none of it added up. This whole thing went down at our family reunion last summer, right when she was about to receive some kind of award from the family for her charitable work. Leah was always the golden child. Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect everything. 3 years ago, she announced at a family dinner that she was starting a charity called Hope for Rural Kids to help underprivileged children in rural areas. The whole family lost their minds over it. My parents couldn't stop talking about how proud they were of her. My grandmother, Nana, who's 76, was so moved that she donated $40,000 of her retirement savings. $40,000. I remember sitting at that dinner table thinking it seemed like a lot, but everyone else was celebrating, so I kept my mouth shut. For the first year or so, Leah posted constantly about the charity, always talking about impact and change and the children. But I started noticing things didn't add up. She bought a new Mercedes, posted pictures from Bali, then Greece, then Dubai. Designer bags all over her Instagram. I know people can have money and run charities, but something felt off. The charity website hadn't been updated since last year, and they kept promising this 2024 impact report that never came. About 6 months ago, I ran into Leah at a coffee shop and casually asked how the charity was going. She got weirdly defensive immediately and changed the subject. That's when I knew something was really wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling, so 2 months before the reunion, I started digging. The charity was registered, that part was real. But when I found the public tax documents, my stomach dropped. All the money went to administrative costs and management fees. 0 program expenses. 0 grants to anyone. 0 documented projects. The management account traced directly back to Leah's name. I kept digging. Found business filings showing Leah as the sole board member and executive director with an $85,000 annual salary. The charity had only raised about $120,000 total over 3 years, mostly from family. No employees, no office, no actual projects. Those photos on social media with kids? Stock photos. I reverse image searched them. I thought about telling my parents privately, but I knew they'd defend her. They always did. I thought about confronting Leah alone, but she'd just lie and cover her tracks like she did at the coffee shop. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this needed to happen publicly, or she couldn't manipulate her way out. The day of the reunion came. Leah showed up late in a designer outfit, and everyone swarmed her like usual. My Uncle Dave announced they were doing a special recognition ceremony for her charitable work. Nana gave this tearful speech about how proud she was, mentioned her donation again. Leah accepted with this fake, humble speech about the children who needed us. I had my tablet in my bag, loaded with everything I'd found. My hands were shaking. This was it. I stood up and asked her, as politely as I could manage, if she could tell us about some of the specific kids her charity had helped. The room went completely quiet. Leah fumbled for a second, then gave this vague answer about privacy concerns and having so many stories she wouldn't know where to start. So I pressed harder, asked her to name just one school she'd partnered with. Her whole face changed. She got angry and said this wasn't the time or place for an interrogation. That's when I pulled out my tablet. I told everyone they deserved to know where their donations actually went. I showed them the tax documents right there on the screen, pointed out the 0 program expenses, all the money going to management. Showed them the business filings with her salary listed. Showed them the stock photos from her website that she'd been passing off as real kids she was helping. Leah's face went white. She tried to grab the tablet out of my hands, started saying I didn't understand how nonprofits work, that it was all about building infrastructure for future programs. Said she was going to launch actual projects next year. My Uncle Dave took the tablet from me and started scrolling through the documents himself. My Aunt Carol kept saying there had to be some mistake. Nana just looked at Leah and asked if it was true. I pulled up the bank statements I'd gotten through a public records request, showed deposits into Leah's personal account that matched exactly with charity transfer dates. That's when Leah completely lost it, started yelling at me that I had no right to dig into her private business. I told her it stopped being private when she stole money meant for poor kids, including $40,000 from our grandmother. She switched tactics fast, started crying, said her accountant had mismanaged everything and she didn't know. Claimed she was a victim, too, that she was about to fix everything. But Uncle Dave had already pulled up the charity website on his phone. Other relatives who donated were demanding answers. My cousin Jessica called her a fraud right to her face. Nana didn't say anything, just stared at Leah with this look of complete betrayal. Leah's husband grabbed her arm and said they were leaving. She screamed at me that I'd destroyed her and asked if I was happy now. Then she stormed out. A few relatives followed her, I guess to comfort her or whatever. The room exploded into arguments. Half the family was furious at Leah, the other half was furious at me for airing everything out in public like that. It was chaos, complete chaos, and I just stood there with my tablet, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life or finally done something that actually mattered. That evening, Nana asked me to take her home. She was silent the entire car ride until we pulled into her driveway. Then she just asked me if she'd really given Leah all that money for nothing. I showed her everything again, more gently this time. She said she should have asked more questions, that she just wanted to believe Leah was doing good. We both cried in her car for a while. The next week my phone wouldn't stop going off. Half the family was thanking me, the other half was calling me cruel. My mom was furious, kept saying I'd humiliated Leah in front of everyone and that I could have told them privately. I reminded her that I'd been hinting at problems for months and nobody wanted to hear it. My dad said he believed me, but asked if it really had to happen like that. I didn't have a good answer for him. Uncle Dave filed a police report. The state attorney general opened an inquiry into nonprofit fraud. Leah's assets got frozen during the investigation. It even made the local news with this headline about a local woman accused of charity fraud. She deleted all her social media after that. Her friends distanced themselves. She got fired from her corporate job because of the investigation. I heard her husband was considering divorce, but I don't know if that actually happened. The family completely split over it. My parents are still cold toward me. They think I took it too far by making it so public. Nana forgave me, though. She said I did the right thing, even if it hurt. Thanksgiving that year got split into 2 separate dinners. I wasn't invited to one of them. Some nights I still have trouble sleeping. I replay that moment over and over, watching her face when I pulled out the tablet. I've wondered 100 times if confronting her privately would have worked. But then I remember how easily she lies, how good she is at manipulation. She would have just covered it up better and kept going. It's been 4 months now. Criminal charges got filed against Leah, and she's trying to plea bargain. Nana will probably get some of her money back, but not all of it. My parents still barely talk to me. Some relatives act like I don't exist at family events. I stand by what I did. Leah needed to be stopped. But I'm not going to pretend it didn't cost me something, too. My mom told me last week that I should have given Leah a chance to fix things quietly, that public humiliation was too far. Maybe she's right. Maybe I wanted to see Leah fall from that pedestal she'd been on our whole lives. I honestly don't know anymore. What I do know is that she's not scamming anyone else. And sometimes I think that has to be enough. That time, I took down my aunt's scheme to frame my mom as a thief. 23, never thought I'd have to choose between keeping the peace and defending my mom, 51, from my Aunt Linda, 48. But here we are. For context, Aunt Linda has always had this jealous thing going on with my mom. Growing up, I'd hear her make these comments about how Mom was the pretty one, how Grandma always liked her better, how everything came so easy for her. Mom never engaged with it. She'd just smile and change the subject, which probably made it worse, honestly. Things really exploded when Grandma passed away 4 months ago. The will reading was tense. Aunt Linda got some money, my uncle got the house, other relatives got various things. But Grandma left her entire antique jewelry collection to my mom. I'm talking about the pieces Grandma wore in all those old photos, the stuff she'd show us as kids and tell stories about. Aunt Linda's face went completely red when the lawyer read that part. She actually stood up and said something about how unfair it was before she stormed out. Mom just sat there looking sad and guilty, even though she hadn't done anything wrong. Fast forward 1 month. Mom called me sobbing because the jewelry box was missing from her bedroom. She'd torn apart the house looking for it. And on that same day, Aunt Linda started making calls. By the next morning, the entire family knew her version of events. According to Aunt Linda, Mom had sold the jewelry for cash and betrayed Grandma's memory. The family group chat was going insane. My cousins stopped texting Mom back. My uncle actually called, demanding she come clean about where the jewelry went. It spread that fast. Mom was devastated. She wore Grandma's locket every single day before it disappeared. These weren't just expensive pieces to her, they were memories. But no one wanted to hear her side. I didn't buy Aunt Linda's story for a second. The timing was way too convenient, and I remembered that she still had a spare key to our house from years ago when she used to water our plants. Something felt off about the whole thing. So I decided to check our security camera footage from that week. We have cameras at the front door and in the hallway. I pulled up the footage from the night before Mom noticed everything was gone. And there she was. Aunt Linda, clear as day, letting herself into our house at 2:47 in the morning. She tried to avoid the cameras, but the hallway one caught her going upstairs. 12 minutes later, she came back down carrying Grandma's jewelry box. I had her. I saved copies of that footage to 3 different devices. Then I sat on it for 2 weeks. I know that sounds weird, but I wanted to see how far Aunt Linda would take this. Turns out, pretty far. She uninvited Mom from my cousin Sarah's baby shower. She kept posting these vague Facebook statuses about family thieves and disappointments. Mom stopped going to her book club because people kept asking uncomfortable questions. I watched her cry multiple times trying to figure out what she did to deserve all this. At one point, Mom even offered to take a lie detector test, and Aunt Linda said it wouldn't prove anything. The whole family had turned on her. Meanwhile, I knew exactly what happened, and I was just waiting for the right moment. That moment came when Uncle Tom announced his annual family barbecue. I knew Aunt Linda would be there. I also knew she'd bring up the jewelry again because she always did. So I packed an HDMI cable in my car and made sure my phone was charged. I told Mom to trust me but didn't explain what I was planning. She almost didn't want to go, but I convinced her. The barbecue was awkward from the start. People were polite to Mom but distant. After dinner, everyone gathered in Uncle Tom's living room, and right on schedule, Aunt Linda started up. She said something about how it was such a shame about Grandma's jewelry, and how Grandma would be heartbroken knowing it was gone. I stood up and asked Uncle Tom if I could use his TV for a second. Before anyone could object, I connected my phone and hit play on the footage. Complete silence. Everyone watched Aunt Linda sneak into our house in the middle of the night and walk out with the jewelry box. Someone asked if that was her. She grabbed her purse and mumbled that it wasn't what it looked like. She tried to leave, but Uncle Tom blocked the door and demanded an explanation. She completely broke down, started saying she just wanted to hold the pieces, that she deserved them more than Mom did. Then she admitted she was planning to keep them hidden for about a year, and then suddenly find them somewhere and claim Mom must have misplaced them, like everyone would just forget about all the accusations she made. The room exploded. People were yelling, Aunt Linda was crying, and Mom just sat there looking exhausted. Aunt Linda eventually left, and later that week her lawyer contacted us about returning the jewelry. She couldn't even face us herself. Uncle Tom apologized to Mom right after Aunt Linda left. Cousin Sarah was crying, saying she felt terrible about the baby shower. Half the family started calling Aunt Linda demanding answers. The other half just sat there in shock. Mom didn't say much. She looked completely drained. We left early because she didn't want to be around anyone anymore. That night Aunt Linda texted me. Not Mom, me. She begged me not to send the video to anyone else and said I'd ruined her enough. Then something about thinking of the family name. The next morning she sent another text saying her own kids were ashamed of her and asking if I was happy now. I didn't respond to any of it. She sent Mom this half-hearted apology about how she was grieving and things got out of hand. Mom didn't respond either. 2 weeks later and the family is still split over this. Aunt Linda's kids apologized to Mom and said they had no idea what their mom was doing. But Aunt Linda's sister, my Aunt Carol, thinks I went too far. Her whole argument is that yes, Linda was wrong, but I humiliated her in front of everyone and could have handled it privately. Uncle Tom's wife agrees. They keep using the word cruel. Aunt Linda hasn't shown up to any family events since. Thanksgiving is next month, and apparently there's drama about whether she'll be invited and where people will sit. Mom got the jewelry back, but she barely looks at it now. She says it just reminds her of all this mess. I don't regret what I did, but I can see how it split everyone down the middle. Some relatives think I did the right thing. Others avoid me at family stuff now. Mom won't tell me how she really feels about my method. She just says she's glad the truth is out there. The thing is, I've been thinking about what Aunt Carol said. If I'd confronted Aunt Linda privately, would she have just denied everything and kept the jewelry hidden forever? She had a whole plan to make Mom look crazy. The public thing was nuclear, but it also meant there was no way for her to spin the story or make excuses. Everyone saw exactly what she did. But now, family events are weird. Some people think I'm vindictive, and I wonder sometimes if clearing Mom's name was worth turning everyone against each other. Part of me thinks Aunt Linda deserved the embarrassment after what she put Mom through. Another part thinks maybe I just made everything worse. I guess I'll find out at Thanksgiving when we see who actually shows up. The day I made my entitled cousin lose the inheritance she tried to steal from me. I, 28, never thought I'd have to fight my own family for something that was rightfully mine. But here we are. My cousin Lila, 31, taught me that blood doesn't always mean loyalty. Right now I'm standing outside my grandfather's seaside house watching her move furniture in, and she has no idea what's about to happen. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to where this mess actually started. 3 months ago, my grandfather passed away after a long illness. I'd been his primary caretaker for the last 2 years. Every week I'd drive over to help with groceries, take him to doctor appointments, or just sit with him on his porch. We'd watch the sunset, and he'd tell me stories about buying that house back in the 70s. Lila showed up maybe 4 times in those 2 years, always with an excuse about being busy with work. The will reading was straightforward. The small seaside house went to me. It was clearly stated, legally filed, everything proper. I was emotional about it because that house meant something to me. Those childhood summers learning to fish with him, the smell of salt air, all of it. The family seemed fine with it at first. A few nods, some supportive comments, and that was that. Then about a week after the funeral, Lila started making comments at family gatherings. Things like how the house had been in the family for generations and should stay in the family. I figured she was just grieving and didn't think much of it. My grandmother was staying with Lila temporarily because she was too devastated to be alone. 2 weeks later, I visited my grandmother and noticed Lila hovering around us the whole time. Grandma seemed distant and confused. Turns out Lila had been feeding her lies about how I was planning to sell the house to developers. When I tried to correct this, Lila interrupted and played the victim about how Grandpa would have wanted it to stay in the family. Then came the family dinner 1 month after Grandpa died. About 15 of us were there at my aunt's house. Mid-meal, Lila stood up with this smug smile on her face and announced that she and Grandma had decided the house should stay where it belongs. She pulled out a handwritten document claiming it was an updated will. Said my grandmother, as Grandpa's wife, had the right to override the original will. This new version gave the house to Lila. The room went silent. Some family members looked uncomfortable, but others actually nodded along. My uncle said if that's what Mom wants, then okay. Lila looked right at me and said she'd be moving in next month and hoped there were no hard feelings. I didn't argue. I just said I had a headache and left early. But I drove straight to my grandfather's lawyer that night and called his emergency number. He confirmed what I suspected. The official will was filed. Any changes would have needed to go through probate court. Grandma couldn't just rewrite it. That handwritten document was worthless. The lawyer asked if I wanted to send a cease and desist right then. I paused and told him not yet. I needed to think about this. Over the next 2 weeks, Lila posted all over social media about her new beach house. She showed paint swatches to family members and started planning renovations. Some people congratulated her. Others reached out to me privately, asking if I was really okay with this. I stayed quiet and just watched. Meanwhile, I worked with the lawyer to prepare all the paperwork and coordinated with the sheriff's office. Then, moving day arrived. Lila rented a truck and got family members to help her. My lawyer called to tell me she was there, unloading furniture. I grabbed my folder of documents and headed to the house. It was time to end this. I pulled up to the house with my lawyer, Mr. Chen, and a sheriff's deputy. Lila was directing people carrying her couch through the front door. When she saw us getting out of the car, her face went from confused to angry in about 2 seconds. She immediately said this was private property now and asked what I was doing there. I stayed calm and told her actually, it wasn't. Mr. Chen stepped forward and introduced himself. He explained that my grandfather's will was properly filed and executed. The handwritten document she had meant nothing legally. My grandmother didn't have the authority to override a filed will. The deputy confirmed they were there to enforce the legal property owner's rights. I watched Lila's face drain of all color as she stammered something about what Grandma had told her. She tried to argue, her voice getting shrill, asked how I could bring lawyers and cops into family business. I told her she made it legal business when she tried to steal my house. She turned to the family members who'd been helping her move and told them not to just stand there. My Uncle Jim set down the box he was carrying and said if the will was filed properly, then there wasn't much anyone could do. My Aunt Maria asked Lila why she hadn't told anyone about this. Mr. Chen produced the official will, probate documents, and property deed. Everything showed me as the rightful owner. The deputy asked Lila to remove her belongings from the property. She broke down crying and said she couldn't believe I was doing this to her. Tried to say Grandpa would be disappointed in me. I finally lost my patience and told her Grandpa left me this house for a reason, because he knew who actually cared about him. Someone called my grandmother and put her on speaker. She sounded confused and didn't really understand what was happening. Lila had taken advantage of her grief and confusion. Grandma admitted she didn't really remember signing anything, and that Lila had told her it was just to make things fair. That's when it hit everyone that Lila had manipulated their grieving mother. Half the family turned on Lila immediately. My Aunt Maria asked how she could use Mom while she was grieving. Uncle Jim just shook his head and walked away. But the other half tried to save face. My Aunt Carol said this could have been handled privately. My cousin Mike asked if it was really necessary to humiliate her like this. Lila started crying harder and claimed she just wanted to preserve family memories. Said she grew up visiting that house too. I reminded her she'd visited 4 times in 2 years while Grandpa was dying. She screamed that she had a job and responsibilities. Someone behind me muttered that I had those too and still showed up. The deputy gave Lila 30 minutes to remove her things. Family members awkwardly helped load the furniture back into the truck. Most people wouldn't make eye contact with me. Lila made one last attempt and said I'd regret this and the whole family would know what I did. I told her good. Let them know I protected what was mine. After everyone left, I stood outside the house with the keys in my hand. Mr. Chen told me I did the right thing and not to let them convince me otherwise. But watching my divided family drive away in different directions, I wasn't so sure. I walked into the house alone and saw the marks on the floor where Lila's furniture had been sitting. The first week after, my phone didn't stop ringing. Aunt Carol left a voicemail saying I could have just talked to Lila and that what I did was cruel. My cousin Mike texted that family gatherings were going to be awkward now. Thanks a lot. But I also got support. Uncle Jim called to apologize for initially believing Lila. Aunt Maria showed up with a casserole and said she should have questioned things from the start. Lila posted on social media with something vague about realizing who your real family is. Her friends who didn't know the full story commented supportively. My friends who knew the truth tried to defend me in the comments. The family drama spilled into public view, and my grandmother's sister called asking if we couldn't all just get along. I finally sat down with my grandmother privately a couple weeks later. She was clearer now, less foggy from the grief. She admitted Lila had been very persuasive and showed her pictures of condos being built on the coast. Said she got scared that developers would tear down Grandpa's house. She apologized for not talking to me first. I reassured her, but also admitted I felt hurt. She told me Grandpa knew what he was doing when he wrote that will, and she was sorry for doubting that. Lila kept trying to turn the family against me, though. She sent this long email to everyone explaining her side, claimed she was trying to keep the house in the main family line, and implied my branch of the family was somehow less legitimate. Some relatives forwarded it to me with eye-roll emojis. Others seemed to actually buy into it. Thanksgiving was approaching and nobody knew what to do. My grandmother suggested 2 separate dinners to keep the peace. That made me feel terrible, like I'd split the family. But Uncle Jim reminded me that Lila did that when she tried to steal from me, not me. I've been spending time at the house, fixing it up and repainting rooms. Found Grandpa's old fishing gear and photos from our childhood summers. I get why he wanted me to have this place. But sitting on the porch alone sometimes feels hollow without the family around. A month later, some relationships are slowly healing. Others seem permanently damaged. Lila hasn't apologized and probably never will. She's apparently telling people she let me have the house to be the bigger person. I ran into her at the grocery store last week, and she literally turned around and walked the other way. I question my methods sometimes. Maybe I should have stopped her before the moving truck arrived and saved her the embarrassment. But then I remember that smug look on her face at the family dinner. The way she manipulated our grieving grandmother. All the lies she spread. The house is legally mine. The family is fractured, but maybe it was already broken underneath. I have what grandfather wanted me to have. I just wonder sometimes if protecting what was mine was worth watching my family fall apart. I sit on this porch most evenings now, watching the sunset like Grandpa used to. And half my family thinks I was justified, while the other half thinks I'm vindictive. I protected what was rightfully mine, but I let Lila humiliate herself in the process. Was it justice, or just revenge dressed up as principle? Honestly, I'm still not completely sure. The day I finally exposed my aunt's lifetime of lies. I, 32, have been dealing with my Aunt Linda, 58, for my entire life. My mom passed away last year at 60, and we were incredibly close. Linda is the kind of person who could start a fight at a birthday party and somehow leave as the victim. She's been doing it for as long as I can remember. When I was 12, Linda accused my mom of stealing our grandmother's jewelry. She made this huge scene at a family dinner, crying about how mom always got everything and she got nothing. Turned out Linda had pawned the jewelry herself to pay off credit card debt. When I was in high school, she borrowed $5,000 from my mom for emergency medical bills and never paid it back. Then she told everyone at Thanksgiving that our side of the family had abandoned her financially. My mom always forgave her, always kept the peace, always asked me to be patient with her. 8 months before mom died, she got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. I took a leave of absence from work and moved back home to take care of her. Linda visited exactly twice in those 8 months. The first time, she brought flowers, stayed for maybe 40 minutes, and took a bunch of photos that she posted online with some caption about being there for family. The second time was 3 weeks before mom passed. She asked mom if she'd updated her will, then left when mom said she was tired. The funeral was exactly what you'd expect. Linda showed up crying louder than anyone else, hugging relatives she hadn't spoken to in years, telling stories about their special bond. I was too exhausted and grief-stricken to react. My Uncle Mark pulled me aside at one point and whispered that I knew she was performing, right? I just nodded. I didn't have the energy to deal with her. Then, 1 week after we buried my mom, Linda posted this long tribute on Facebook. Most of it was the standard stuff about how much she'd miss her sister. But at the end, she wrote that it broke her heart that some people had kept her away during mom's final months, and she'd never understand how her own daughter could abandon her when she needed family most. My phone exploded. Texts from relatives, family friends, even mom's neighbors. My cousin Rachel asked if it was true, and why I hadn't let Linda visit. I sat there in mom's house, surrounded by boxes I still needed to pack, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. That's when I found mom's phone. I'd been avoiding going through it, but I needed to see something. I opened her texts and found our thread, daily updates, photos, voice notes. Then I found the messages mom had sent to Linda over those 8 months, asking if she could visit, telling her the chemo was rough, saying she missed her. Linda's responses were always the same. Too busy with church. Can't this week. One-word replies. I stayed up all night going through everything. By morning, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to let her rewrite history. I spent the next day gathering everything I could find. Screenshots of every text conversation between mom and me, showing I was there every single day. Hospital visitor logs from mom's medical portal that only showed 2 entries for Linda in 8 months. My leave of absence paperwork from work. Voice notes where mom thanked me for taking care of her, where she said she wished Linda would visit more, and the last one, where she called me her rock. I had photos with timestamps of me at the hospital, helping her at home, sitting with her during chemo sessions. Then I went through Linda's Facebook. She'd been posting the whole time mom was sick. Vacation photos, church events, brunch with friends. All of it dated and time-stamped. I organized everything chronologically, 40+ images in total, and uploaded them to an Imgur album. 3 days after Linda's post, I went back to her tribute about mom and commented directly underneath. I wrote one line. Since we're sharing memories, here's the truth about those final months. And posted the link. At the end of the album, I added one caption. Mom kept asking why you never came. I told her you were busy because I didn't want to break her heart. These are the facts. No commentary needed. I hit post, put my phone on silent, and went to bed. When I woke up, I had over 300 notifications. Linda's original post now had hundreds of new comments, and none of them were sympathetic anymore. Her friends were asking if it was real, saying they were disappointed. The family group chat was going insane. Uncle Mark sent a thumbs up emoji. Rachel wrote, "Holy shit," in all caps. Even my grandma, who's 82 and barely uses her phone, commented that Linda had always been like this. People kept tagging Linda's church friends. Someone tagged her pastor. Apparently her church group had donated money because they thought she needed help caring for her sister. Local family friends started sharing my comment, saying they couldn't believe they'd felt sorry for her. Over the next 2 days, I watched everything fall apart for her online. She deleted her original post, but people had already screenshot it. Her friend count dropped from over 800 to under 200. One of her church friends posted that their community group would be taking a break from meeting at Linda's house. Family members who'd defended her for years either unfollowed her or went completely silent. On day 3, Linda posted something vague about how families should handle things privately, and public humiliation was never the answer. The comments tore her apart. She deleted it within an hour, then posted that she was taking a social media break to focus on healing and prayer. Uncle Mark texted me that night. Grandma had cut Linda off completely. She said she was done enabling her after what she'd done to Mom's memory. 3 weeks later, an unknown number called me at 11 at night. It was Linda, crying, begging me to take the post down. She went on about how her reputation was ruined. Her friends wouldn't talk to her. The church had asked her to step back from volunteering. Even her hairdresser had been cold to her. I stayed quiet and let her talk. When she finally asked what I wanted from her, I told her I didn't want anything. She'd done this to herself. She started getting angry, saying I'd always been vindictive, just like my mother when I cut her off. Told her not to talk about Mom. There was this long pause. Then she went back to crying and begging. I hung up. Uncle Mark called the next day to tell me Grandma was updating her will and removing Linda as executor. Family gatherings started happening again without her, which was a first in my entire life. Thanksgiving that year was quiet but peaceful. Rachel said it was weird, but she didn't miss the drama. No one reached out to Linda, and no one asked about her. What I didn't expect was other family members starting to share their own stories. Uncle Mark told me Linda had spread rumors that he didn't help with Grandpa's funeral costs when he'd actually paid for half. My cousin said Linda borrowed $3,000 from her 5 years ago, never paid it back, then told people my cousin had refused to help her. I wasn't her first victim, just her most recent. 6 months went by. I was still living in Mom's house, going through her things slowly. I found her journal from 2 years ago. There was an entry about Linda calling to ask for money again, and Mom saying no for once. Linda had hung up on her. Mom wrote that she hoped Linda would realize what she was losing by treating people this way. Another entry from a month before her diagnosis said Mom worried about how Linda would treat me after she was gone, and that she hoped I'd protect myself. The post is still up. I never deleted it. Linda sent me a birthday card a few months ago. Generic. Just her name signed at the bottom. I didn't respond. When Grandma had a stroke and was in the hospital recovering, Linda tried to visit. The family turned her away. Uncle Mark told me she was trying to find a way back in, and not to let her. Last week, Linda showed up at the house. I watched through the window as she sat in her car for 20 minutes. She never knocked. Eventually, she just drove away. I still haven't changed the locks. Keep meaning to. I don't know what she wanted. Maybe to apologize, maybe to yell at me, maybe to try manipulating me again. Part of me wonders if I should have answered the door. The other part knows exactly how that conversation would have gone. The day I made my father's golden wife lose everything she stole from me. I, 27-year-old female, never thought I'd be the kind of person to destroy someone in court, but my stepmother Clarissa, 52-year-old female, left me no choice after what she did following my father Robert's 58-year-old male at time of death, passing 6 months ago. Let me back up a bit. My parents divorced when I was 15. Pretty standard stuff. They just grew apart. 2 years later, Dad met Clarissa at some charity gala. She was a realtor who, looking back, seemed to specialize in luxury properties and lonely widowers. Within 6 months, they were married. I tried to be happy for him, I really did. But something about her always felt off. Clarissa was a master at manipulation. She'd convince my dad that I only visited for money, even though I was working 2 jobs through college and never asked for a cent. Whenever I had breaks from school and planned to visit, she'd suddenly have urgent couples trips planned. The few times I'd call, she'd answer his phone and claim he was busy, then tell him later that I never called back. By my junior year, our relationship was basically non-existent. 3 weeks after I graduated, Dad had a sudden heart attack. I got the call at 2 a.m. and drove 4 hours straight to the hospital. But by the time I arrived, Clarissa had already handled everything. He was gone. At the funeral, she played the grieving widow perfectly, dabbing her eyes with tissues while telling my relatives I hadn't visited in years. Complete bullshit. But who was going to argue with a widow at a funeral? Here's where things get interesting. 3 weeks after we buried him, Clarissa filed paperwork claiming everything had been transferred to her name. She produced this new will that was supposedly dated 1 week before his death. According to her version, Dad left me nothing, not even my grandmother's jewelry or the watch he'd promised me since I was 12. She actually told family members that I never cared about him and didn't deserve a cent. The real kicker came 2 days later when I got an eviction notice for my childhood home. The house, where my height marks were still on the kitchen doorframe, where Dad taught me to ride a bike in the driveway. She gave me 30 days to remove any personal belongings, though she'd already donated most of my childhood stuff to charity. That's when I knew I had to fight back, because this wasn't just about money. She was trying to erase me from my father's life completely. Something about the whole situation didn't sit right with me. Dad was organized to a fault. He kept handwritten notes for everything. So while Clarissa was away on a spa weekend, yes, really, a spa weekend 5 weeks after her husband died, I used my old key to get into the house. Call it breaking and entering if you want, but it was still technically my childhood home for another 2 weeks. Dad's study looked the same as always, except for the missing family photos. I went straight to his desk and found the hidden compartment he'd shown me when I was 10, where he used to hide my birthday presents. Inside, I hit the jackpot. There was a handwritten note, dated 2 months before his death, that said, clear as day, "Everything goes to my daughter after I'm gone. Clarissa will be comfortable, but not in charge." But that wasn't all. I found his original will leaving me 70% and Clarissa 30%, plus a receipt for a will revision appointment that was scheduled for after his death. I took photos of everything and got out of there. The next morning, I called Dad's old lawyer friend Marcus, who'd been suspicious about the new will but couldn't prove anything. He connected me with a forensic computer expert who found something incredible. The digital will had been altered from Clarissa's IP address, with timestamps showing the changes were made 48 hours after Dad died. Marcus then came forward with emails showing Dad never authorized any changes, and he'd been trying to reach Dad the week he died, but Clarissa kept saying he was too sick for visitors. The real smoking gun came when Marcus pulled security footage from the law firm. There was Clarissa, clear as day, using a stolen keycard to break into the office at 11 p.m., 3 days after the funeral. The courtroom was packed. Clarissa showed up in designer black, still playing the grieving widow card. Her lawyer tried to paint me as bitter and vengeful, claiming I was fabricating evidence because I'd been cut out of the will. Then we started presenting our evidence piece by piece. First the handwritten notes, then the computer forensics, then the emails, finally the security footage. I watched Clarissa's face change from smug to confused to completely panicked. When the judge asked her to explain why she'd need to break into a law firm if she had legitimate authorization, she actually tried to claim Dad must have given her permission. The judge asked why a dead man would give her permission to break into a building. The entire courtroom went silent. The judge took less than an hour to make his decision. The fraudulent will was invalidated, the original reinstated, and criminal charges were recommended for fraud and breaking and entering. The judge ordered Clarissa to vacate the property within 30 days. She still got her 30% from the original will, but lost control of Dad's company and all the main assets she'd tried to steal. The criminal charges meant she was looking at possible jail time, though her lawyer managed to get her probation and community service. Still, the fraud conviction basically made her unemployable in real estate, or any field requiring trust. The family fallout was swift and brutal. Dad's siblings, who'd been completely on Clarissa's side during the funeral, suddenly went radio silent. Then the truth started coming out. My Aunt Martha admitted Clarissa had been borrowing money from her for funeral expenses, that we later found out Dad had already prepaid. Uncle Tom discovered she'd tried to sell Dad's vintage car collection without telling anyone, claiming she needed the money for grief counseling. One by one, family members removed Clarissa from the group chat. I started getting apology texts from relatives who'd believed her lies about me being an absent daughter. Turns out, she'd been telling everyone I was a drug addict who Dad had cut off contact with. Meanwhile, I was graduating magna cum laude and working at an accounting firm. The hardest part was what I found after moving back into the house. In the attic, stuffed behind old Christmas decorations, were boxes of photos Clarissa had hidden. All pictures of me and Dad together. Birthday parties, fishing trips, my high school graduation. She'd literally tried to erase me. I also found more of Dad's notes, including one that said, "I think I made a mistake but don't know how to fix it." Our housekeeper, Rosa, told me Dad had been trying to call me the week before he died, but his phone wasn't working right. I checked the phone records. Clarissa had blocked my number on his phone. He died thinking I didn't want to talk to him. Clarissa sent me one final text before I blocked her. "Your father would be ashamed of what you've done to me." I screenshot it and kept it, just in case. It's been 3 months now. I'm living in my childhood home, slowly going through Dad's things, finding little notes he left in random books. Last week, I found one in his favorite novel that said, "Tell my daughter I'm proud of her." Clarissa had no idea these notes existed because she never cared about the things that mattered to him. Sometimes I lie awake, wondering if I should feel guilty for completely destroying her life. She's 52, basically unemployable, and lost everyone who might have helped her. But then I remember she stole my last chance to reconcile with my father, made him die thinking I didn't care. So am I heartless for letting her get crushed by her own lies? Or was this just the justice my father intended all along? The day I finally made my brother admit he sabotaged my wedding. I, 28, have always lived in the shadow of my older brother Marcus, 31. Growing up, he made sure every achievement I had somehow became about him. When I graduated college with honors, he showed up drunk and made a scene. When I got my first promotion, he announced his engagement at my celebration dinner. So when I got engaged last year, Marcus made this joke about how he'd make sure it was a wedding no one would forget. I laughed it off. That was my first mistake. 1 week before the wedding, my caterer called to cancel. They claimed we never paid the deposit. I was confused because I had the bank statement right in front of me, showing the payment went through 2 months ago. Before I could even process that, the florist called the next day. They were dropping us completely, said we'd been sending abusive emails demanding free upgrades and threatening to leave bad reviews if they didn't comply. My fiancé was in tears. Our wedding was falling apart, and we had no idea why. I started calling every vendor we'd booked. The DJ mentioned getting weird emails, but ignored them. The venue coordinator said someone tried to cancel our reservation entirely, but thankfully they called to confirm first. It was all too coordinated to be a coincidence. Someone was sabotaging us, and they were doing it from my own email account. I demanded the email records from the florist. Sure enough, the messages came from my address, but they were sent at times I was either at work or asleep. I had a friend who works in IT take a look. He pulled up the login history on my email account and found an IP address I didn't recognize. We traced it using some online tools. It led straight to Marcus's house. I just sat there staring at the screen. Part of me wanted to be shocked, but honestly, I wasn't. This was exactly who Marcus had always been. He crashed my college graduation speech because he couldn't stand not being the center of attention. He announced his promotion at my engagement party. Every single milestone I'd ever had, he found a way to make it about him or ruin it completely. But this time I had proof. My fiancé wanted to confront him immediately, drive over there and have it out. But I had a better idea. Our rehearsal dinner was in 3 days. I told her to trust me and act like everything was normal. Then I started putting together a slideshow. I spent the next 3 days acting completely normal around Marcus. We had a family lunch and I smiled through the whole thing. Meanwhile, I was secretly working with backup vendors to salvage what we could and building my presentation. Screenshots of every email with the headers showing IP addresses, timestamps proving I couldn't have sent them. The IP trace results with Marcus's address highlighted. I even included our legitimate payment receipts to show the caterer lie. By the time the rehearsal dinner came around, I had everything ready. The evening started normally enough. Family and the wedding party were all gathered at the restaurant, everyone drinking and laughing. Marcus showed up looking smug as always, making jokes during cocktails about how stressful wedding planning must be. He had this little smirk on his face that made my blood boil, but I stayed calm. My fiancée kept glancing at me nervously, but she trusted the plan. The toasts began after dinner. My parents went first, then the maid of honor, then the best man. Everyone was relaxed and emotional, sharing sweet stories. Then Marcus stood up with his glass and volunteered to give a toast. He went on about sibling rivalry and how we always kept each other on our toes, how competition made us stronger. Some relatives laughed, but it felt uncomfortable. He was practically gloating. When he finished, I stood up and thanked him for his words. I told everyone I'd also prepared something special to share. I dimmed the lights and turned on the projector I'd set up earlier. The slideshow started with some childhood photos of Marcus and me, nothing suspicious. Then the next slide said, "A week ago, our caterer canceled." The room got quiet. The screenshots started appearing on screen. The abusive emails sent from my account. The headers with IP addresses clearly visible. Then the step-by-step IP trace showing exactly where those emails came from. The final slide showed Marcus's home address matching the IP perfectly. The silence was deafening. Every single person turned to look at Marcus. His face went from confused to pale to bright red in about 5 seconds. He tried to say something about how this was crazy, how he would never, but his voice cracked. My dad just stared at him with this look of complete disgust. My mom started crying. Marcus stood up so fast his chair fell backward. He tried to defend himself, but no words came out that made sense. Then he just stormed out, practically running for the door. His girlfriend scrambled after him, looking absolutely mortified. No one tried to stop them. After Marcus left, the room stayed silent for what felt like forever. My fiancé squeezed my hand under the table. Finally, my best friend broke the tension by saying, "Well, that happened." And people started murmuring. The rehearsal dinner continued, but it was awkward as hell. Some family members came up to hug me and say they finally understood what I'd been dealing with. A few of my aunts and uncles left early without saying much. The next morning, my phone exploded with texts. My parents were split down the middle. Mom was upset that I humiliated Marcus publicly and said I should have handled it privately. Dad said Marcus got exactly what he deserved, and he was proud I stood up for myself. My younger cousins were completely on my side. The older relatives thought I went too far. Marcus's friends sent messages calling me psycho and vindictive. My friends and my fiancé's family all supported what I did. The wedding happened, and it was actually beautiful despite everything. We found replacement vendors and pulled it together. Marcus obviously didn't show up. A few extended family members who were close to him decided not to come either, but everyone who mattered was there, and it ended up being perfect. It's been 2 months since then, and I haven't heard a single word from Marcus. No apology, no explanation, nothing. Mutual friends tell me he's going around saying I doctored the evidence, which is insane considering how many people saw it. Some family members keep trying to play peacemaker. My parents want me to be the bigger person and reach out first. I've refused every time. Some nights I do question whether the public exposure was the right move. Maybe I could have confronted him privately first. But then I remember all the years of him sabotaging my moments and stealing my spotlight. I tried talking to him privately after the engagement party incident, and he just laughed it off. This was the only language he'd ever understand. Public accountability was the only thing that would actually make him face consequences. The holidays are coming up, and I have no idea what's going to happen. Some relatives have suggested family therapy. Honestly, I'm not even sure I want reconciliation. Marcus has never once taken accountability for anything he's done to me. Part of me feels relief that the truth is finally out there, but there's also this sadness about how fractured the family has become. My wife supports whatever I decide. Mom called last week saying Marcus wants to meet up to talk. I haven't responded yet. Part of me wants answers, but another part knows he's probably just going to make excuses and play the victim like he always does. The evening I forced my stepdad to confess what he did to my mother's savings. I, 28, have been dealing with my stepdad Robert, 52, for the past 6 years, ever since my real dad died and Mom, 54, remarried him. My dad passed when I was 22, and Mom met Robert about a year later through mutual friends. He seemed decent enough back then. Supportive, patient with her grief, all that stuff you want to see in someone dating your widowed parent. 3 weeks earlier, I need to explain how I discovered what he'd been doing. Mom got sick 2 months ago. Nothing life-threatening, but enough that she needed help organizing her medical paperwork and bills. She asked me to come over one weekend to sort through everything because she was too exhausted to deal with it herself. I said yes, obviously. While I was going through documents at her house, I found a statement for her retirement savings account, the one she and my dad had built together over 20 years. I knew that account was supposed to have around $180,000 in it, because Mom had mentioned it before when talking about retirement plans. The statement showed $23,000. I stared at that number for a solid minute, thinking I was reading it wrong. I checked the account number twice. It was definitely hers. I went to Mom's room where she was resting and asked her about it as casually as I could. She looked confused and said Robert handles all that financial stuff now. She told me they merged their accounts 2 years ago because he said it would simplify everything and make managing household expenses easier. That's when the red flag went up. I asked Mom if I could have the login credentials for the account. Told her I wanted to organize everything digitally so she wouldn't have to worry about paperwork anymore. She gave them to me without hesitation. I spent that entire weekend going through transaction history. The hospital bills and medical expenses totaled maybe $35,000 to $40,000 max. but the account had lost over $150,000. Then I found them. Monthly transfers ranging from $8,000 to $15,000 going to an account under the name Patricia Hendricks. A quick Facebook search showed me Patricia Hendricks was Robert's sister. The transfers started 14 months ago and became more frequent in recent months. I did the math. Over $120,000 gone. And Mom had no idea because she trusted him completely. I printed everything. Every statement, every transfer, highlighted in yellow. I wasn't going to confront him privately because Robert's a manipulator, and he'd find some way to explain it away to Mom. He has this monthly family dinner tradition where he invites his side of the family over and loves playing the devoted husband role. So I decided, if he wants an audience for his performance, he'll get one for his exposure too. That's how I ended up at this dinner table tonight, listening to him toast to family values and taking care of the ones we love, with a folder full of evidence sitting in my lap. I just had to wait for the right moment. The dinner was set up exactly how Robert liked it. Mom, me, Patricia, Robert's brother and his wife, all sitting around the table while he stood at the head, giving his usual speech about being a responsible provider and putting family first. Everyone was nodding along. Mom was smiling weakly because she was still recovering and didn't have the energy for much else. I waited until he got to the part about how he's always been transparent and honest with the people he loves. That's when I interrupted. I said, actually, since we're talking about responsibility and family, I wanted to ask him about something. I pulled out the bank statements and spread them across the table in front of him. Then I asked if he could explain the transfers to his sister's account. He froze. His face went completely pale, and he tried to laugh it off. He started saying something about not knowing what I was talking about, but I cut him off. I told him they were monthly transfers from Mom's retirement account, over $120,000 in the past year. The room went dead silent. Patricia looked either genuinely confused or she was pretending to be. She didn't say anything, just stared at the papers. Robert tried his first excuse about medical bills draining the account. I told him Mom's medical expenses were $40,000 and I had all the invoices. I asked where the other $80,000 went. Then he tried saying he was investing it for her. I asked him since when is his sister's personal checking account an investment vehicle. He started getting defensive and angry, saying I don't understand how finances work and that this was more complicated than I realized. Mom had been silent the whole time, just staring at the statements. She picked one up with shaking hands and looked at Robert. Then she said the one thing that destroyed everything. She told him she trusted him more than anyone. Her voice was quiet, but everyone heard it. Robert's brother tried to defend him at first, but even he looked uncertain. Robert tried to say this was a private matter, and I had no right to air it out like this. I told him he made it public every time he stood up and bragged about being such a great husband. I said everyone deserved to know who he really was. He tried everything after that. Guilt-tripping Mom about everything he'd done for her, trying to say he was going to tell her and was just trying to protect something or other. He got aggressive with me and said I had no right to go through their finances. That's when Mom spoke again and asked him whose finances. She said it was her money that she and my first dad had saved together. Robert grabbed his coat and stormed out. Patricia left right after him without saying a word to anyone. The rest of the family just sat there in this horrible, uncomfortable silence. Mom asked me to take her home, and I did. The next morning, everything changed. Mom called a divorce lawyer first thing the next morning. The lawyer told her it was clear-cut financial abuse and theft. She filed a police report that same day and started divorce proceedings. Robert tried calling and texting non-stop. He showed up at the house twice. Mom blocked him on everything and told him to communicate through her lawyer only. Through the legal process, we found out Robert had gambling debts. Apparently, the money went into Patricia's account and then got withdrawn in cash. The lawyer thinks he was paying off bookies or covering losses. Patricia claimed she thought it was his money to use, but she couldn't actually prove she didn't know where it came from. Mom managed to recover about $45,000 through the legal action. The rest was just gone. Robert's living with Patricia now in her 2-bedroom apartment. His own family has mostly distanced themselves from him. Some of them still talk to him, but the respect is completely gone. He tried painting himself as the victim on social media, saying, "I turned everyone against him." No one bought it. The family's pretty divided about how I handled things, though. Some of Mom's relatives told me I humiliated him unnecessarily. My aunt said I could have let Mom handle it privately, away from everyone. I told her Mom was handling it privately by not knowing she was being robbed. Other relatives said he needed to be exposed and that I did the right thing. Mom's doing better health-wise now. Financially, she's struggling, but she's working with a financial advisor to rebuild what she can. Emotionally, she's still hurt, but she says she feels lighter without him. She thanked me for exposing what he did, but she also keeps saying she feels embarrassed it happened. She keeps repeating that she should have seen the signs. I don't regret the public exposure. Some people say I was cruel and that I should have been the bigger person. But I watched my mom get manipulated for 6 years. I watched her become smaller and more uncertain about everything. I couldn't just sit there anymore. It's been 4 months since that dinner. Mom is rebuilding her life, and I'm helping however I can. Robert sent a message last week through a mutual friend, saying if I hadn't interfered, they could have worked it out. Like he's the victim here. Part of me wonders if exposing him that way makes me just as bad as him. Maybe I am vindictive. Maybe I did want to destroy his image in front of everyone. But then I remember my mom's face when she realized what he'd done. And I think about how many more months or years it could have gone on if I'd stayed silent. So I guess that's my story. Some relatives still aren't speaking to me. Others say I saved Mom's life. I just know I couldn't watch it happen anymore. The moment I made my uncle pay for decades of family manipulation started with what everyone thought was an act of kindness. I, 28, never thought I'd be the one to bring down my uncle Richard, 56, the man my entire family treated like royalty for as long as I could remember. Growing up, Richard was always the golden child, charismatic, always with a story about how he saved the family business, always the center of attention at every gathering. My dad was his business partner. They inherited the manufacturing company from my grandfather 15 years ago. But you'd never know it from the way Richard talked. He took credit for everything, while my dad worked 70-hour weeks and came home exhausted. I noticed it as a kid, the way Dad would be stressed about payroll, while Richard showed up in a new Mercedes. But whenever I mentioned it, the family shut me down. I didn't understand business, they said. Richard was the face of the company, the deal maker. Dad was just the operations guy. Then Dad died 8 months ago. Heart attack at 54. At the funeral, Richard gave this touching speech about his brother and partner, how they built everything together. 2 weeks later, he called me in for a meeting and offered me Dad's old position. He'd teach me how things really worked, he said. Guide me the way he wished he could have guided Dad. My mom was thrilled. The whole family kept telling me how lucky I was, how generous Richard was being. I accepted, but something felt off from day one. Files were disorganized, records were missing, and Richard brushed off every question I asked. He was never in the office, always at supposed client meetings that somehow involved golf courses and expensive restaurants. Then I found Dad's old notebook in the desk drawer. Pages of circled invoice numbers, dates, cryptic notes in the margins. Dad had been tracking something. 3 weeks in, I overheard Richard on the phone saying the kid didn't know anything and to keep doing what they'd been doing. That's when I started staying late, copying files to my personal drive, pretending I was just learning the systems. A month later, I found it. A fake invoice for $3,000 to a vendor that didn't exist. I cross-referenced it with Dad's notes. He'd circled that exact invoice. Dad knew. He'd been gathering evidence. And maybe all that stress is what killed him. I realized then this was going to take months, and I had no idea how deep it actually went. 4 months after I found that first fake invoice, I had everything. Over $200,000 in fake invoices, Richard's home renovations, his kids' college tuition, vacation properties, all charged to the company as business expenses. Worse, he'd been pocketing employee retirement contributions. The money was deducted from their paychecks but never deposited. He'd also taken out business loans in the company's name and used the cash for personal investments. Dad's notes confirmed he'd documented almost all of it but never acted. I thought about going to Richard privately. I really did. But then I'd remember his performance at Dad's funeral, the way he positioned himself as the generous uncle taking me under his wing, the decades of taking credit for Dad's work. I thought about the employees who'd lost their retirement money, about Dad's stress, about how Richard would just talk his way out of it if I confronted him alone. This needed to be public. The annual shareholders meeting was in 2 weeks. I quietly met with the company lawyer who'd always respected Dad. He reviewed everything and confirmed it was fraud, embezzlement, possibly criminal. I prepared the presentation, made copies of every document, and told no one, not even Mom. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. Richard opened the meeting like always, all smiles, talking about strong leadership during the transition. When it came time for the financial report, I stood up and asked to present something. He looked annoyed but agreed, probably thinking I was just being eager to impress everyone. I started with the first fake invoice on the screen. Richard interrupted immediately, saying this was inappropriate and we could discuss it privately. I ignored him and kept going. Document after document. The fake invoices, the personal expenses, the missing retirement funds, the unauthorized loans. His whole demeanor changed when he realized this was serious. He tried laughing it off, saying I clearly didn't understand business accounting. I showed Dad's notes, the pattern over years. He got angry then, raising his voice about how Dad had authorized everything, how this was a family matter, and I was grieving and didn't know what I was talking about. Then, an employee spoke up asking about the retirement money. Another shareholder pointed out the invoices were all to companies that didn't exist. The company lawyer stood and said he'd reviewed everything, and it showed clear evidence of fraud. Richard tried to leave, but a shareholder blocked the door. A vote was called. He was forced to resign on the spot, and a full audit was ordered. As he walked out, he looked at me and said I had no idea what I'd just done to this family. I told him I knew exactly what I did. That was 3 weeks ago. The family split right down the middle. Mom felt betrayed. I'd humiliated him in front of everyone, she said. Richard's sister won't speak to me. Some cousins took my side. Others took his. The family group chat turned into a war zone. Richard's wife called me crying, saying I destroyed their family. I expected to feel victorious, but mostly I just felt hollow. The audit confirmed everything, and then some. Over $400,000 stolen in total. Criminal charges were filed. Richard has to repay it all, sell his vacation home, liquidate assets. The employee retirement funds will be restored. His reputation in the local business community is destroyed. Mom barely speaks to me now. She keeps saying I could have come to her first, that he's still family. I asked her if she would have believed me if I'd gone to her privately, and she went silent. Didn't answer. Some family members are actually believing Richard's claim that Dad authorized some of the expenses, saying I misunderstood their arrangement. The criminal case could take years, and meanwhile, I'm running the company with all of this hanging over everything. The employees thank me privately. One guy who was about to retire told me I saved him, that he would have lost everything. He also said Dad would be proud, that Dad was gathering the same evidence before he died. The company lawyer said I did the right thing. But family gatherings are canceled now. Everyone's taking sides. Holidays will never be the same. Late one night at the office, I found another note from Dad tucked in his desk. It said if I was reading it, I'd found what he found, and he was sorry he was too weak to do anything about it. He told me to do what he couldn't. I sat there for an hour just staring at it. Maybe that's why he left all those notes, why he wanted me in the business. But knowing that doesn't make the family divide any easier. Mom finally agreed to meet me for coffee yesterday. She looked exhausted. She told me she'd found some of Dad's notes at home from years ago. I asked what she thought now, and she said she needed time. She wasn't saying I was wrong, but she wasn't saying I was right either. We sat there in silence for a while before she left. It's been 3 weeks since that meeting, and it feels like 3 years. Half the family won't talk to me. The other half treats me like a hero. The employees are grateful, but I lost so much in the process. Richard is still claiming innocence, playing the victim, and some relatives want to believe him. I keep replaying that moment in the meeting, hearing his voice saying, I had no idea what I'd done to the family. Some days I'm sure I made the right choice. Other days I wonder if I just wanted revenge and called it justice. The night I made my aunt regret treating me like her personal maid. I, 25F, have been dealing with my Aunt Linda, 48, for the past 3 years, and I need to tell you what finally made me snap. Linda's always been the successful one in our family. Big house in the city, always hosting holidays, making sure everyone knew how generous she was. What nobody talked about was how she actually treated people behind closed doors. 3 years ago, when I was 22 and starting college, she offered me a room. Said it would help me get on my feet, save money, focus on school. I was grateful. I just left our small hometown and didn't know anyone in the city. The first week was fine, normal even. Then the requests started. It was small things at first. Could I just throw in a load of laundry while I was doing mine? Would I mind picking up groceries on my way home? Maybe cook dinner a few nights a week since she worked late. But small things became expectations. Daily chores, her meals, her laundry, cleaning the entire house, running her errands. And whenever I did these things, she'd phrase it like I was earning my keep, like I owed her. I was working 2 part-time jobs at this point. Mornings at a coffee shop, evenings tutoring students. I'd come home exhausted and still have to make sure dinner was ready when she walked through the door. The breaking point came one night when I got back from a double shift and found her dirty laundry dumped on my bed. Not in a basket, just thrown there. I was too tired to deal with it, so I moved it to the floor and went to sleep. The next morning, she came into my room and asked why her laundry wasn't done. I told her, as politely as I could, that I'd appreciate it if she stopped leaving her clothes on my bed. That's when she snapped at me. Told me not to forget who was keeping a roof over my head. Like I wasn't working 40 hours a week and doing all her housework on top of school. That moment, something shifted in me. I didn't say anything back, just nodded and went to class. 2 weeks later, she announced she was throwing a dinner party, handed me a list of everything I needed to cook, how to set up, what to serve. Didn't ask, just expected it. The way she said it, like I was hired help, made my decision for me. I smiled and told her of course I'd help, but in my head, I was already planning my exit. That's when I started looking for apartments. I found a studio apartment near campus within 3 days. It was tiny and barely affordable, but it was mine. I signed the lease that weekend and didn't tell anyone. For the next 2 weeks, I moved my stuff out slowly. A box during my lunch break. A bag after my morning shift. Things she'd never notice were missing because she never paid attention to anything in my room unless it affected her. The whole time I kept playing the part. Cooked her meals, did her laundry, cleaned the house. She had no idea I was counting down the days. The night of the dinner party finally came. I spent hours cooking everything on her list, set the table exactly how she wanted, made sure everything looked perfect. Her guests started arriving around 7, and she was in full performance mode, laughing loud, showing off the house, making sure everyone knew how well she was doing. Then she decided to give a tour. I was in the kitchen plating appetizers when I heard her bringing people through. She walked them past my room and gestured toward it like it was part of the house features. One of her friends asked who stayed there, and that's when I heard it. She introduced me as the girl who lives off her kindness. Not her niece, not someone staying with her temporarily. The girl who lives off her kindness. Her friends looked uncomfortable. I stood there holding a tray of food, and she was smiling at me like she expected me to agree or thank her or something. Something in me just went cold and calm. I smiled back, set down the tray, and kept serving like nothing happened. But I knew right then I wasn't staying another hour in that house. Midway through dinner, right when they were finishing dessert, I excused myself. Told everyone I had an early shift the next morning and needed to get some sleep. My aunt barely acknowledged me, just waved me off. I went to my room, grabbed the duffel bag I'd packed that morning with my last few things, and walked straight out the front door. I left my house key on the kitchen counter on my way out. I didn't look back, didn't leave a note, just left. The next morning I woke up to 47 missed calls, all from her. I finally listened to one of the voicemails and she was screaming. Her house was a mess. Her guests had left with dishes piled everywhere. She didn't know how to work her own washing machine. She kept yelling about how I could do this to her, how embarrassing it was, how ungrateful I was. I didn't call her back. I blocked her number 2 days later. The first few days after I left, my phone didn't stop. Calls, texts, voicemails. She'd swing between guilt-tripping and threatening me, telling me how ungrateful I was after everything she did for me, how she was going to tell my mother, how I'd regret this. I blocked her number on day 3 and finally got some peace. A week later, she showed up at the coffee shop where I work. She walked in during the morning rush, acting all concerned, asking my coworkers if she could talk to me, saying she'd been so worried, playing the role of the caring aunt in front of everyone. I agreed to talk on my break because I didn't want to cause a scene at work. We went outside and she immediately started with the guilt, asked how I could leave without telling her, started crying about how embarrassed she was in front of her friends. I just stood there and let her finish. Then I told her calmly that she didn't need to worry about me anymore, that I'd found somewhere that doesn't require servitude. Her whole face changed. The tears stopped. She realized I wasn't coming back and wasn't going to apologize. She tried telling me that wasn't fair, that she gave me a place to stay. I said we were even considering I gave her 3 years of unpaid labor. She left angry, and I went back to finish my shift. It's been 2 months since then. She's been complaining to everyone in the family. Her version of the story is that I betrayed her hospitality and took advantage of her generosity. But here's the thing that makes me laugh. She's asked 2 of our cousins and my younger brother if they want to stay with her. All 3 of them suddenly have other arrangements. Funny how that works. My mom called me last week saying Linda seems really stressed and maybe I should apologize. I asked Mom if she'd like to go help Linda with her laundry instead. She changed the subject pretty quick. Some family members think I should have given her notice, that leaving like that was too harsh. Others are quietly admitting they always thought something was off about the whole arrangement. My friends all say I did the right thing. but there's still this small part of me that wonders if I handled it wrong. Last week I ran into her at a family birthday party. She pretended I didn't exist, didn't look at me once the entire time. Honestly, I'm fine with that. But I keep thinking about why I still feel like I need to justify standing up for myself. Why leaving a situation where I was being used somehow makes me the bad guy in her story. The night I finally made my mother's favorite son face his own cruelty. I, 32-year-old female, have been dealing with years of resentment toward my younger brother Mark, 29-year-old male, and the ghost of my mother's favoritism that followed us even after her death. Growing up, I was the invisible child. Mark could literally do nothing wrong in my mother's eyes. When he was 16, he stole $200 from her purse, and somehow I got in trouble for not watching him better. Meanwhile, I got grounded for getting a B+ in AP Chemistry because I was capable of more. He got a car after failing his driving test 3 times. Mom said he was just nervous. When I got a full scholarship to college, it was dismissed as me being lucky. When Mark dropped out after 2 semesters, he was just finding himself. 3 years ago, everything changed when Mom got diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. I left my marketing job in Chicago and moved back to our small hometown in Ohio to take care of her. And I mean really take care of her. The daily chemo appointments, managing 20 different medications, cleaning up vomit at 3 a.m., helping her shower when she was too weak to stand. The works. Mark's contribution? Monthly phone calls and 2 whole visits in the first year. He lived in California, which apparently made him immune to family responsibilities. Mom would make excuses for him constantly. "Mark's so busy with his life out there," she'd say while I was literally wiping drool from her chin. Then came her final 2 weeks. Suddenly, Mark appeared like some kind of grief vampire. He posted daily Facebook updates about caring for Mom and told every hospice nurse he was managing everything. I wanted to scream, but kept my mouth shut because Mom was dying, and it wasn't the time. 2 days after the funeral, I found him loading Mom's things into his rental car. He'd already been through her room, her closet, everything. That's when I realized the shoebox was missing. The one with 47 letters Mom had written to me during her treatment. When I confronted him, he said he'd already dropped some old papers at Goodwill that morning. I drove straight to Goodwill and paid $50 to get those letters back. They weren't just old papers. They were the only proof that Mom had actually seen me, actually appreciated what I was doing, even if she couldn't say it out loud. Standing in that Goodwill, clutching that box, something inside me snapped. I was done letting Mark rewrite history. I was done being invisible. That's when I started planning exactly how I was going to expose him. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a woman on a mission. I went through my phone, my laptop, everything, and started building my case. I had screenshots of all my work-from-home requests to care for Mom, over 400 photos of me giving her medications, helping her walk, sitting with her through chemo. I found receipts totaling $23,000 that I'd spent on medications, medical supplies, and home modifications like the shower rail and toilet seat riser. The text messages were the most damning. So many texts of Mark declining to visit because it was too depressing, or he couldn't handle seeing her like that. Meanwhile, his Instagram showed him living it up in Vegas, Cabo, and Portland during Mom's worst months. The contrast was sickening. 1 month after the funeral, Aunt Sharon organized a memorial dinner at this little Italian place Mom loved. 22 relatives showed up. Mark arrived 15 minutes late and immediately started his performance. He actually stood up and gave this speech about being Mom's emotional support and her constant companion during her journey. He said I only helped when convenient, and then, this is what sent me over the edge, he implied I'd only moved back home because I knew about the inheritance. I waited until he finished talking about how Mom left everything split equally between us. How generous it was of her. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the manila folder I'd been carrying around for 2 weeks. "Actually, Mark, I have something everyone should see," I said, my voice way calmer than I felt inside. I started passing around the evidence, the receipts, the photos, everything. I read some of his text messages out loud. The worst one was from 6 months before Mom died. "I can't deal with watching her die. You handle it." The entire table went silent. The final blow was a photo I'd asked a nurse to take. Me holding Mom's hand as she passed. The timestamp showed 3:47 p.m. Then I showed them Mark's flight confirmation. He didn't land until 6 p.m. that day. The silence lasted maybe 30 seconds, but felt like 30 minutes. Uncle Tom was the first to speak. Just said, "Jesus, Mark." Aunt Sharon started crying. Cousin Lisa kept repeating that she had no idea. Mark's face went through every color. Red, white, this weird pale green. He tried to defend himself, said something about the pressure he was under, but nobody was buying it anymore. He stood up so fast he knocked over his wine glass, didn't even stop to clean it up, just stormed out. His girlfriend Stephanie stayed behind for a second, whispered, "I suspected," to me, then followed him out. The rest of us just sat there, surrounded by breadsticks and the ruins of my family's perfect son narrative. The rest of the dinner was awkward, but supportive. Several relatives apologized for believing Mark's version of events. Aunt Sharon admitted she'd always wondered why I looked so exhausted at the funeral, while Mark seemed so well rested. Uncle Tom actually offered to reimburse some of my expenses, which I declined. I didn't do it for money. I did it because it was right. Mark blocked me on everything that night. Phone, social media, email, probably even LinkedIn. His girlfriend Stephanie reached out privately a few days later and told me she was reconsidering their relationship. Apparently, this wasn't the first time she'd caught him lying about major things, but seeing the proof laid out like that was her final straw. The extended family pretty much split into camps. Most supported me, but said I should have handled it privately. A few thought I was cruel to humiliate him in public. Aunt Patricia, Mom's sister, told me that your mother would be heartbroken. That one stung, not gonna lie. It's been 3 months since that dinner, and Mark and I still haven't spoken. I found out through cousins that he's telling people I ambushed him and that I doctored the evidence. Some people actually believe him, which is wild considering I had literal receipts. I started therapy to process everything and moved back to Chicago. Got my old job back, which was nice. I keep one of Mom's letters in my wallet. The one where she thanked me for being there, but also wrote that she wished Mark would visit more. Even in her private thoughts, she couldn't fully let go of him. Sometimes at 3 a.m., I wonder if Mom knew what she was doing to us. Like, did she realize she was pitting us against each other our whole lives? My therapist says I needed to reclaim my narrative, but I'm not sure if the cost was worth it. Sure, people know the truth now. But what did I really gain? Last week, I got a text from an unknown number. You may have won, but you lost a brother. I'm pretty sure it was Mark using someone else's phone. The thing is, did I ever actually have a brother to lose? Or was I always just competing with Mom's imagination of who Mark could be? Yesterday, Stephanie called me out of the blue. She found something while moving out of Mark's apartment. Mom's journal from the year before she got sick. She said there's stuff in there about both of us that I need to see. We're meeting for coffee tomorrow. Part of me doesn't want to know what Mom really thought about us. But I'm going anyway. After everything, I need to know if she saw what she was doing to us, or if she was blind to it until the very end. The weekend I made my greedy stepbrother regret undermining my mother's will. I, 28, never thought I'd be fighting my stepbrother Evan, 31, over my dead mother's belongings. But here we are. Mom died 3 weeks ago from cancer. She was a freelance artist who ran a small studio from home, and honestly, it wasn't much, but it was everything she'd built over 20 years of work. Evan came into the picture when Mom married his dad 5 years ago. He lived in Seattle and visited maybe twice a year for holidays. That was it. The will reading happened at the lawyer's office about a week after the funeral. Just me, Evan, and his dad sitting in those uncomfortable leather chairs. The lawyer laid it out pretty simply. The studio, all the artwork, and her savings account, around $45,000, went to me. Stepdad got some personal items and sentimental things. Evan got nothing specific because, honestly, Mom barely knew him. They weren't close. He was just her husband's son who showed up for Christmas dinner. I could see Evan's face turning red as the lawyer finished reading. He didn't say anything right there, but you could tell he was pissed. Later that evening, back at the house, he cornered me in the kitchen and told me this wasn't fair. That because his dad married my mom, he was family too and deserved something. I tried to be diplomatic about it. I told him Mom made her choices, and she'd built that studio before she even met his dad. He just looked at me and said, "We'd see about that." I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured he was just upset and needed to blow off steam. 2 days later, I got served legal papers. Evan had filed a dispute in probate court. The claim said he had evidence that Mom promised him her artwork collection before she died. Attached to the filing was this printed email, supposedly from Mom's account, dated a month before her death. In it, she allegedly said she wanted Evan to have at least half of everything, especially the paintings. I stared at that email for 10 minutes straight because Mom never said anything like that to me. Not once. I called the lawyer immediately and she said this was going to complicate things. We'd need to respond and possibly go to court. Meanwhile, Evan started posting on Facebook about being cut out of his stepmom's will by a greedy stepdaughter. Mutual family members started calling. Some believed him. My aunt actually asked me if I was being selfish. I was drowning in grief, and now I had to deal with legal stress on top of it. I couldn't even process Mom's death because I was too busy gathering evidence and meeting with lawyers. One night I was sitting in Mom's studio, going through her things, and I thought about how meticulous she was. She kept records of everything. There had to be something here that could help me. That's when I started looking through her old external hard drive. I spent the entire weekend going through Mom's files. Years of journals, sketches, business records. She had everything backed up multiple times. I was clicking through folders labeled things like 2024_taxes and 2024.com missions when I found one called final_thoughts. My hand was shaking when I opened it. There was a voice memo dated exactly 1 week before Mom died. I almost didn't click play because I wasn't ready to hear her voice again, but I did. It was weak, but clear. She said she was making the recording because she wanted there to be no confusion. Everything she had, the studio, the art, the savings, went to me. She said Evan was a good kid, but he had his own life and career. He'd be fine on his own. I needed this. I'd earned it. I broke down listening to it, but I also felt this surge of anger at Evan for putting me through all of this. I looked at the email he'd submitted again, and something felt off. Mom never called her paintings pieces or used phrases like, "distribute my assets." I logged into her actual email account and searched for anything sent to Evan during that time period. There was nothing. The sent folder showed no record of that email existing. I took screenshots of everything and brought it all to my lawyer. She listened to the memo and told me it was perfect evidence, but we needed more. We dug into the metadata of Evan's email. It had been created as a PDF, not forwarded from an actual email client. The timestamp showed it was supposedly sent at 3 in the morning, which made no sense because Mom was never up that late, especially when she was sick. My lawyer said Evan was screwed, but we should let him commit to his story in court first. It felt ruthless, but also like he deserved it after everything he'd put me through. Court day came, and Evan went first. He was so confident it made me sick. He told this whole sob story about loving his stepmom and how they'd talked about art together. He even teared up at one point. My lawyer started asking him questions about his relationship with Mom. How many times had he visited in the last year? Evan said a few times. My lawyer told him it was actually twice, Christmas and Easter. Then she asked about phone calls and texts. Evan said he got a new phone and everything was gone. Convenient. Then my lawyer asked about the email. Why had he printed it instead of forwarding the original? Evan said he thought a printout was fine. She told him we'd examined Mom's email account and there was no record of it ever being sent. He started sweating. That's when she played the voice memo. Mom's voice filled the courtroom. Everything goes to my daughter. Evan will be fine on his own. I watched his face go completely pale. The judge dismissed the case immediately and fined Evan $5,000 for submitting fraudulent evidence. Evan lost it. He started yelling about how I'd ruined his life and that he deserved that money. Then he stormed out. Outside the courthouse, Evan was screaming at me about how I'd set him up and made him look bad. His dad tried to calm him down, but Evan told me not to expect any relationship with the family anymore. I just stood there and said that was fine with me. Within hours, everyone knew what happened. Some relatives called to apologize for doubting me. Others said I went too far by letting Evan humiliate himself in court instead of showing him the recording privately. My aunt told me I didn't have to destroy him publicly like that. My cousin said he got what he deserved for forging evidence. Stepdad sent me a text saying he was sorry and hoped I could forgive Evan someday. I never responded. Evan deleted all his social media posts about being the victim. Some mutual friends unfollowed him. Others posted vague things about the truth always coming out. I didn't post anything, but people who were at court were definitely talking. The story kind of took on a life of its own. Back at Mom's studio, I finally had legal clearance to claim everything. But it felt hollow. The art was still beautiful, but now it was tainted by this whole fight. I kept thinking about Evan's face in court, and I couldn't tell if what I felt was satisfaction or something darker. My friend asked if I regretted how I handled it, and I told her I didn't know. Part of me felt like he deserved to be exposed for lying, but another part wondered if I was just as petty as him. She said he forged evidence and I just proved my case. I said yeah, but I let him dig himself deeper when I could have ended it sooner. The $45,000 is going to help me a lot. I can pay off debt and maybe go back to school. But it came at the cost of a family relationship that's now permanently fractured. Mom wouldn't have wanted this drama, but she also wanted me to have this. It's complicated. 3 months later, I've integrated the studio into my life. Some of Mom's paintings are displayed, and others are stored carefully. I haven't heard from Evan since court. Stepdad sends occasional texts, but it's awkward. The family is split, and probably always will be. I still think about whether I was wrong to wait and let him commit to his lies before showing the proof. Part of me thinks it was strategic and necessary. Part of me feels like I stooped to his level. A lawyer friend told me I played by the rules, and he didn't. But rules don't make everything feel right. Last week I got a message request from an unknown account. It just said that I might think I won, but this isn't over. Could be Evan. Could be some random troll. Either way, I'm not sure the ruthless approach was worth it. But I also don't know if I had any other choice. When I finally took down my uncle's cruel business scheme. I'm 31 now, and this whole thing technically ended about 6 months ago, but I'm still processing it. The main players here are me, my dad who's 62, my mom who's 60, and my uncle Raymond who's 65, my dad's older brother. I need to give you some context first, because none of this makes sense without understanding what Raymond did to us. 15 years ago, when I was 16, my dad and Uncle Raymond were starting a business together. Dad did everything. He spent months getting permits, drawing up business plans, securing the initial funding from his own savings, and a loan he personally guaranteed. Raymond was supposed to handle operations once things got rolling, but Dad built the foundation from scratch. The company started making real money within the first year. That's when Raymond changed. He started having meetings without my dad, making decisions alone, bringing in his own people. Then one day Dad got served papers saying he was being removed from the company. Raymond had forged documents, backdated agreements, and brought in lawyers who made it look like Dad was just a consultant who'd been paid for his work. Fighting it in court would have cost more than we had, especially since Raymond had already drained the business accounts that Dad had access to. We lost everything. Our house, my college fund, my parents' retirement savings that had gone into the business. We moved into a tiny apartment, and I watched my dad become a shell of himself for years. I was just a kid, but I remember sitting in our new, cramped living room and making myself a promise. I would never forget what Raymond did. Everyone else in the family acted like nothing happened. Raymond showed up to holidays with expensive gifts, talking about his success, and people just smiled and congratulated him. It made me sick. Fast forward to 3 years ago. I'd become a forensic accountant, partly because of what happened with Raymond.
I wanted to understand exactly how people like him got away with financial manipulation. I was working for a firm that specialized in corporate fraud investigation. Then my cousin's wedding happened, and Raymond was there, loud as ever, talking about his latest business ventures. He mentioned some contract work his company was doing, and the way he described it sounded off to me. The numbers didn't make sense. Too much money moving around for what should have been simple projects. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. The next morning I started digging into public records. It took me about 2 months of searching through business filings, tax documents, contractor licenses, anything publicly available. Then I found it. Shell contractors. Companies that existed on paper, but had no actual employees, no real addresses, just P.O. boxes. They were all receiving payments from Raymond's company for consulting services and contract work. The amounts were insane, millions flowing through these fake companies over several years, and it all traced back to accounts that I'm pretty sure Raymond controlled. I knew I had something, but I needed more. I needed the actual financial records, the internal ledgers, the real transaction trails. I reached out to someone I'd worked with before, another forensic accountant who'd moved into private investigation work. I told him what I suspected, and he had contacts who could access things I couldn't legally touch. Over the next 6 months, we built a case. Altered ledgers showing one thing to investors and tax authorities, while the real books showed money disappearing. Fake tax write-offs, payments to contractors who didn't exist, pattern after pattern of fraud. The whole time I kept thinking about my dad and how Raymond had stolen everything from him and faced no consequences.
I compiled everything into a detailed report. Transaction trails, copies of documents, analysis showing exactly how the money moved and where it ended up. Then I sent it anonymously to the IRS, the SEC, and to Raymond's 3 biggest investors. I sent those packages on a Tuesday morning. By Friday afternoon, the news broke that Raymond's company was under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. It moved faster than I expected. The investors immediately froze their funding and started their own audit. Federal investigators showed up at his offices. Within 2 weeks, his assets were frozen pending the investigation. I watched it all happen from a distance, reading news articles and business reports online. My parents didn't know I had anything to do with it. Nobody did. To everyone else, it looked like authorities had finally caught up with him, or maybe a whistleblower from inside his company had come forward. The family group chat exploded. Cousins asking what was happening. Aunts and uncles in denial, saying it must be a misunderstanding. Raymond's wife posted something about how they were being persecuted, and the truth would come out. But the truth did come out. As investigators dug deeper, they found everything I'd found and more. Turns out Raymond had been doing this for almost a decade. The fake contractors, the shell companies, the hidden accounts. It was all there, and it was all illegal. His company collapsed within 3 months. Partners fled, employees got laid off, and Raymond's name went from successful businessman to white-collar criminal in every business publication in our state. The board forced him out, and criminal charges were filed. I remember the day I saw his mugshot online. He looked smaller somehow, tired and old. Around this time, my dad started seeming lighter. He didn't know I was behind it, but watching Raymond finally face consequences was healing something in him. Mom, too. They started talking about the past without that heavy sadness that had always been there before. Then, about 4 months after I sent those packages, my phone rang at 11 p.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Raymond. His voice was thin, almost pleading. He said he knew I worked in forensic accounting now, and that he needed help understanding the charges against him. He actually said I was family, and family helps each other, that I owed him that much. I hung up without saying a word. He called back twice more that night. I blocked the number. The next day I got a voicemail from his lawyer, way more desperate than any lawyer should sound. Then emails from some of my aunts and uncles saying Raymond was asking about me, that he needed help, and I should at least talk to him, because what happened with your dad was business, but this is serious. Like that made it okay. I didn't respond to anyone. I just let it all play out. The criminal trial took about 8 months. I didn't attend, but I followed every detail online. Raymond pleaded guilty eventually. His lawyers probably told him there was no way out with the evidence against him. He got 4 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay back millions in restitution. His assets were seized to pay investors and cover the fraud. The house, the cars, the vacation properties, all gone. His wife filed for divorce halfway through the trial. My parents eventually found out through family gossip that Raymond had called me asking for help. Dad asked me about it once, carefully, like he was afraid of the answer. I told him Raymond called, and I hung up. Dad just nodded and never brought it up again. But I saw something in his face. Relief, maybe, or pride, probably both. The family split over what happened. Some people still defend Raymond, say he made mistakes but didn't deserve to lose everything. Others quietly admitted they'd always suspected he wasn't as legitimate as he pretended to be. Nobody knows I was the one who turned him in, and I plan to keep it that way. I saw my dad smile more in the last 6 months than I had in the previous 15 years. He and Mom started talking about traveling, about actually enjoying retirement instead of just surviving it. That weight that had been crushing them was finally gone. Some of my relatives have said things like, "Revenge doesn't fix the past," or you can't heal by watching someone else suffer. Maybe they're right in some cosmic sense. But watching Raymond face real consequences for what he did, and watching my parents finally get peace, fixed something in me I didn't even know was still broken. Raymond got out on parole last month after serving 2 years. I heard through the family grapevine that he's living in a small apartment 2 states away, working some kind of regular job because no one will touch him for business anymore. His name is poison in our industry. He tried to reach out to Dad once, from what I understand. Some letter about making amends and asking for forgiveness. Dad threw it away without reading it. I still work as a forensic accountant. I'm good at what I do, and every time I uncover fraud, I think about that wedding where Raymond talked about his business and something felt wrong. About how I almost didn't pursue it, almost convinced myself it wasn't worth it, or that I was just being vindictive. But I did pursue it. And maybe that makes me petty, or maybe it makes me someone who actually followed through on leveling the scales. I haven't lost sleep over it once. When I made my golden brother face the truth about our parents' favoritism. I, 32, have spent my entire life watching my parents worship my older brother Daniel, 35. Growing up, it was painfully obvious who the favorite was. Daniel got a brand new car for his 16th birthday, while I got a congratulations card when I bought my own beat-up Honda at 17 with money from my part-time job. My parents paid for his entire college tuition at a private university. I took out loans and worked through school. Every time Daniel screwed up, and he screwed up a lot, Mom and Dad were right there to fix it, write the check, make the excuses. I was just expected to stay quiet and be the responsible one. This pattern followed us into adulthood. Daniel started 3 different businesses that all failed within a year. Each time, my parents bailed him out. He made terrible investments, racked up credit card debt, borrowed money he never paid back, and each time, they covered for him. Meanwhile, I had a stable job, paid my bills on time, never asked for anything. That apparently made me boring and unworthy of attention. 5 years ago, my parents hit some financial trouble. I never got the full story, but suddenly they couldn't keep up with the property taxes and mortgage on the family home. I stepped in because that's what I always did. I put the property taxes under my name temporarily, started covering utilities, and eventually took over the mortgage payments. My parents promised it was just until they got back on their feet. Daniel was conveniently too broke to help, always had some excuse about his latest venture needing capital. 3 months ago, my parents announced they were finally retiring. They called a family dinner, and I actually thought maybe they wanted to thank me for keeping them afloat all those years. I was so stupid. They sat us down and told us they were giving the house to Daniel. Just like that. Their reasoning? He's the oldest, and he'll take care of them in their old age. I sat there in shock, trying to process what I was hearing. When I brought up the 5 years of payments, the thousands of dollars I'd spent keeping the roof over their heads, my mom waved it off. That was just me helping family, she said. That's what good daughters do. Daniel actually shrugged. He looked at me and said it made sense, like I should have seen this coming, like I should have known that no matter what I did, I'd always come in second place. I drove home that night gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. I was done. Done being the backup plan, done being invisible, done letting them treat me like I was disposable. That's when I decided to do something they never thought I was capable of. The next morning, I started digging through every file cabinet and folder I had. 5 years of property tax receipts, every single mortgage payment confirmation, utility bills, bank transfer records, everything. I made copies of it all and put together a file that was 3 inches thick. I called a lawyer that afternoon. When I laid everything out for her, she looked through the documents for maybe 10 minutes before she told me I had a strong case. Since I'd been covering all the financial responsibility and everything was documented under my name, I could file for legal ownership. It took 3 weeks to get all the paperwork in order, and I didn't breathe a word of it to anyone. Daniel was already posting on Facebook about his new house and all the renovations he wanted to do. That made it easier, honestly, watching him act like he'd earned something he had no right to. The legal notice arrived at my parents' house on a Tuesday. My phone started ringing 20 minutes later. My mom was hysterical, screaming about betrayal and how could I do this to them. My dad called next, his voice cold and disgusted. Then Daniel. He was threatening legal action, calling me every name he could think of, yelling about how I was humiliating him and ruining his life. They demanded an emergency family meeting. I showed up at the house with my folder of receipts, and Daniel was already there, pacing around like a caged animal. The second I walked in, they started. My mom crying about how ungrateful I was after everything they'd done for me. My dad saying I was vindictive and cruel. Daniel went on this whole speech about family loyalty and how I was destroying everything over money, how I was embarrassing him in front of everyone. I let them go on for a while. Then I opened the folder and started pulling out receipts. I laid them on the kitchen table one by one. Property taxes, 2020 through 2025. Mortgage statements with my bank account number. Utility bills in my name. I told them to add it up, see how much I'd spent keeping them from losing everything. My mom tried the family card again. Family helps family, she said. I looked at her and asked when any of them had ever helped me. The room went quiet. Daniel tried pulling out childhood memories, talking about how close we used to be, how family should stick together. I told him the house was legally mine, and I'd earned every square foot of it. My dad gave me an ultimatum right there. Drop the claim, or they'd disown me. I chose the house. I walked out while my mom was still crying, and by the time I got home, my phone was exploding with messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins. Daniel had already started calling everyone, spinning his version of the story. The family group chat turned into a war zone. Aunts and uncles I barely talked to were suddenly experts on what I should have done. Most of them sided with Daniel and my parents, calling me heartless and greedy. A few cousins reached out privately to say they understood, but they weren't about to say it publicly and deal with the backlash. 2 weeks after that meeting, the court finalized everything. The house was officially mine. My parents had 60 days to find somewhere else to live, though I told them they could take 90 if they needed it. Daniel blocked me on every platform he could find. My parents stopped answering my calls entirely. The extended family kept trying. I'd get calls from my aunt lecturing me about forgiveness, from my uncle saying I was tearing the family apart over pride. I stopped answering after a while. A few relatives cut contact completely, said they wanted nothing to do with someone who could treat their parents like that. It's been 4 months now. I moved into the house last month. The place was in worse shape than I thought. Turns out Daniel hadn't been planning to do much actual maintenance, just cosmetic stuff for his Instagram. The roof needed repairs. The HVAC system was dying. There were plumbing issues my parents had been ignoring for years. I'm fixing everything myself now, which is ironic because I would have ended up doing it anyway, even if they'd given the house to Daniel. My parents still won't talk to me. Daniel's apparently struggling financially again. I heard through the grapevine that another one of his ideas fell through. Part of me wonders if they'll come crawling back when he needs another bailout and realizes I'm not available anymore. Life is quieter now. I'm not getting emergency calls about Daniel's latest crisis. I'm not sending money to cover someone else's mistakes. I sleep better, honestly. But I also eat dinner alone every night. And sometimes I catch myself reaching for my phone to text my mom about something random before I remember we don't do that anymore. Last week, my mom sent me a text. I still haven't opened it. I can see the preview. It starts with, "We need to talk about." But I don't know if I'm ready to see the rest. Part of me wants to delete it and move on. Part of me wants to know if she's finally ready to acknowledge what they did. Part of me is just tired of the whole thing.
I have the house. I have my peace. I have proof that I was right. But I'm sitting in this living room by myself, wondering if standing up for myself was supposed to feel this lonely. When I made my greedy sister watch her own lies collapse in front of everyone. I, 28, have been dealing with my sister Amanda, 32, for my entire life. She's always been the golden child. Married with 2 kids, always got what she wanted growing up, and somehow managed to make every situation about her. I'm the quiet one who works in accounting and keeps my head down. We were never close, but things got significantly worse after our dad passed away 8 months ago from a heart attack. Dad left behind a trust fund of about $150,000 that was supposed to be split equally between us. It was set up through a local bank with digital access for both of us. Pretty straightforward. But almost immediately after the funeral, Amanda started making comments about how she needed it more because she has kids to support. Her husband lost his job 6 months ago, so money's been tight for them. I get that. But the trust was Dad's decision, not mine. I started noticing things were off about 3 months after Dad died. Small withdrawals here and there that seemed weird. I brought it up to Amanda casually at one of our family Sunday dinners at Mom's place, and she got super defensive. After that, things got tense whenever we were in the same room. Then came the emergency family meeting. Amanda called it out of nowhere and told me to come to Mom's house. When I got there, I saw Amanda sitting at the dining table with this folder of papers, Mom looking worried, and even Aunt Carol and Uncle Mike were there, which was unusual for a weeknight. That's when Amanda dropped it on me. She accused me of stealing $30,000 from the trust. She had these bank statements with withdrawals highlighted, going on about how she'd been tracking everything and had proof of my unauthorized access. I just sat there in complete shock. The papers looked official. She was crying, talking about her kids, asking how I could do this to the family. Mom looked at me and asked if it was true. I couldn't even form words. Everyone was staring at me like I'd committed some horrible crime. Amanda kept going, adding more details, making it sound so convincing. The meeting ended in chaos. I left feeling humiliated and confused, and Mom asked me to figure it out. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept going over everything in my head. I knew I hadn't taken that money. And then it hit me around 3 in the morning. If I didn't take it, then who did? The next morning, I went straight to the bank when it opened. I needed answers. I walked into the bank and asked for the full transaction logs. Not just statements, but the detailed access records that show everything. The rep said it would take 3 or 4 business days. Those were the longest days of my life. Meanwhile, Amanda was blowing up the family group chat, playing the victim, talking about how betrayed she felt. Mom kept texting me privately, asking me to just apologize and work it out. I refused. I wasn't admitting to something I didn't do. Aunt Carol reached out to me separately and said something felt off about Amanda's whole story, which made me feel slightly less insane. A week later, I got the email that my documents were ready. I went back to the bank and picked up this thick envelope of records. The officer walked me through how the digital access logs work. Every single withdrawal has a timestamp, a device ID, and shows whether someone logged in with a fingerprint or a password. I started going through it right there at her desk, and my stomach dropped. All those withdrawals Amanda accused me of, every single one was made from her phone, her registered device, with her fingerprint authentication. The timestamps showed some were made at 11 at night, 2 in the morning, times when I was definitely not at a bank. I had my own small, legitimate withdrawals for my half of the trust, all properly documented from my phone. But the $30,000 she said I stole, that was all her. I sat in the bank parking lot for probably an hour just staring at the papers. She'd planned this whole thing, made fake statements, rehearsed her accusation, got the family involved. She was trying to take my half of the inheritance and pin it on me so she wouldn't get caught taking extra. For a minute I thought about confronting her privately, but then I realized she made this public. She humiliated me in front of everyone, so the truth needed to be public too. I texted the family group chat and said I had information everyone needed to see, and we'd discuss it at Sunday dinner at Mom's. Amanda responded immediately, asking what information, telling me I just needed to admit what I did. I didn't engage, just said Sunday, and everyone would see the real documents. Mom tried to cancel it. I told her this was happening. Aunt Carol said she'd be there. Sunday came, and I brought my folder. Everyone was there again, same setup as before. Amanda started talking immediately, but I stopped her. I told her to tell her story first, explain everything again. So she did. She went all out, crying, adding new details, saying Dad would be disappointed in me. Mom was tearing up. Uncle Mike looked furious. I let her finish completely. Then I put the bank documents on the table and walked them through it piece by piece. I showed them everything: the transaction logs, the timestamps, the fingerprint authentication from Amanda's device. Aunt Carol picked up the papers, and you could see it on her face when she understood. Uncle Mike just stared at Amanda. Mom went completely silent. Amanda's face went from confused to red to completely white. She tried to say there must be some mistake, that it wasn't what it looked like. I stayed calm and told her there was no mistake. She withdrew the money, made fake statements, and accused me in front of everyone. She started crying differently then, panicked, cornered. She tried saying they needed the money, that she was desperate. I told her she should have asked, or just taken her half, but instead she tried to take mine and destroy my reputation in the process. She looked at Mom trying to get sympathy, but Mom's voice was ice cold when she said Amanda had lied to all of them. Uncle Mike said he couldn't believe she'd done this. Amanda grabbed her purse, said we didn't understand, and left. We heard her car peel out of the driveway. The family sat there in stunned silence afterward. Mom apologized to me, crying. Aunt Carol hugged me and said she knew something was off. We talked about whether to press charges, but I just wanted my share of the trust back. Mom agreed to help redistribute everything properly through lawyers. The next few weeks were weird. Amanda sent angry texts saying I'd humiliated her and ruined everything. Then she went silent. Mom told me Amanda's husband was furious. He hadn't known about any of it. The trust got sorted out and I finally got my inheritance. Family gatherings continued, but Amanda stopped showing up. That was 3 months ago. Amanda's been mostly cut off from family events since then. She sent one apology text that felt empty, something about being desperate and sorry. I never responded. I heard through Mom that she and her husband are in counseling now. Aunt Carol and Uncle Mike have been supportive, but Mom still struggles with guilt over enabling Amanda for years. Last week, Amanda showed up at my apartment unannounced, wanting to talk. She said I couldn't cut her out forever because we're family. I reminded her she tried to steal from me and destroy my reputation. She got angry and said I was being self-righteous, that I should have just helped her when she needed it. That confirmed everything for me. She still sees herself as the victim. I told her to leave. I feel relieved the truth came out, but I also watched my sister's life fall apart because of her own choices. Mom keeps suggesting maybe someday we'll reconcile, but I don't see how that's possible. The trust is completely broken, and I'm not sure it can ever be repaired. Why I let my father's lie destroy his perfect reputation. I, 34, have spent the last decade working under my father, Richard, 67, at the commercial real estate firm he built from the ground up. To everyone in our town, he's the guy who shows up to every charity event, leads the church board, and gives these inspiring speeches about integrity and family values. My older brother Marcus, 37, works in sales at the company, but mostly just shows up for the paycheck. My younger sister, Amy, 29, teaches elementary school and has always been Dad's favorite because she never questioned him. What people don't see is how Dad operates behind closed doors. For years, he's told me I'd never measure up to his standards, even while I was the one handling the actual operations, negotiating contracts, managing our biggest clients, fixing his mistakes when deals went south. He'd show up to board meetings and present my work as his own strategies. When I'd bring it up privately, he'd say I was being sensitive, and that's just how business works. I learned to keep my mouth shut, because fighting him meant dealing with weeks of silent treatment and getting cut out of important meetings. My siblings saw glimpses of it, but never the full picture. Marcus didn't care enough to notice, and Amy thought I was just jealous of Dad's success. I stopped trying to explain it to them years ago. Then, 6 months ago, Dad had a massive stroke. The doctor said he'd recover, but needed to step back from work stress. I visited him in the hospital every day, and on one of those visits he grabbed my hand and told me he was sorry. He said he knew I'd been holding everything together, and that he wanted to make it official. I'd manage the business while he recovered, and when he retired, I'd be named his successor. He actually looked me in the eye and said, "I'm finally ready to acknowledge everything you've done." I wanted to believe him so badly. For 3 weeks, I actually did believe him. I took over operations fully, started making decisions without running them by him first. Worked 18-hour days to keep everything stable during the transition. The board seemed receptive. Clients told me they were relieved I was taking charge. Then my brother Marcus called me on a random Tuesday afternoon. He sounded uncomfortable, like he wasn't sure if he should be making the call. He told me Dad had been calling him and Amy, along with several board members, telling them I was trying to steal control of the company while he was too weak to stop me. Dad was painting me as some power-hungry traitor who was taking advantage of his illness to push him out. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. That's when I decided I was done protecting his lies. I spent that entire night going through my emails and files. I wasn't even angry at first, just numb. But as I started pulling documents, the anger came. Every single thing I found made it worse. I had emails from Dad explicitly approving my decisions on major deals. I had reports showing I'd been running day-to-day operations for the last 5 years, while he focused on his public image. I had documents proving he'd made 3 catastrophic investment decisions that nearly tanked us, and I was the one who had quietly fixed them without telling the board. There were even messages where he thanked me for covering up his mistakes because it would have damaged his reputation. Over the next 2 weeks, I organized everything into a timeline. I made copies of signed contracts where my work was presented as his. I pulled financial records showing the real numbers versus what he'd been reporting to investors. The evidence was damning, and I knew it. I sent everything to the full board of directors, our major investors, and several key business partners in the industry. No dramatic press release, no public statement, just a detailed email with attachments and a simple subject line. Financial documentation and operational history 2015 to 2025. The response was immediate. My phone started ringing within an hour. The board called an emergency meeting. 2 investors demanded a face-to-face with Dad. One of our longtime partners emailed me directly, saying he'd always suspected something was off about Dad taking credit for deals he knew I'd negotiated. Dad tried calling me 17 times that first day. I didn't answer. He left voicemails calling me ungrateful, saying I was destroying everything he'd built, asking how I could betray family like this. Marcus texted me, saying I'd gone too far,
and that we could have handled this privately. Amy didn't contact me at all, but then things really started falling apart for him. 3 board members who'd been Dad's closest allies for decades stopped returning his calls. The church board quietly asked him to step down from leadership. Investors started pulling out or demanding new management oversight. People in town who'd always treated him like some kind of hero started looking at him differently. The worst part for Dad wasn't even the business fallout. It was watching his carefully constructed image crumble. This man had spent 40 years building a reputation as the honest, hard-working family man who pulled himself up by his bootstraps. Now everyone knew he'd been taking credit for his son's work and hiding financial disasters. He called me ungrateful for airing our dirty laundry, said I'd humiliated him in front of everyone who mattered. But I was done protecting his lies. For once, I didn't have to live in his shadow. I made my own light. It's been 4 months since everything went public, and I'm still processing what I did. The board ended up keeping me on as CEO. Dad technically still owns his shares, but he has 0 operational control now. He recovered enough from the stroke to get around, but his reputation never recovered.
He barely leaves the house anymore. The invitations to speak at events dried up. The church moved on without him. People who used to call him for advice don't anymore. Marcus still isn't speaking to me. He thinks I should have just quit and walked away instead of burning everything down. Amy called me once, about 6 weeks after it all happened, and told me she understood why I did it, but that she couldn't choose sides. I haven't heard from her since. My mom stays neutral, but I can tell she wishes I'd just kept quiet like I always had. But I also got support from places I didn't expect. 2 of the younger board members told me privately they were relieved someone finally stood up to him. Several clients said they'd been waiting for this transition for years. An old colleague from another firm reached out and said everyone in the industry knew Dad was coasting on other people's work. The company is actually doing better now. We're more transparent, more efficient. I'm making decisions without second-guessing whether they'll bruise someone's ego. For the first time in my career, my name is on the work I do. But I'd be lying if I said I don't have moments of doubt. Sometimes I'll be working late and wonder if I could have just walked away and started over somewhere else. Maybe I didn't need to destroy him to free myself. There are nights when I think about how he's probably sitting at home, isolated, watching everything he built his identity around disappear. That was my dad, even if he was a terrible one. Last week I ran into him at the grocery store. We made eye contact across the produce section. He looked older, smaller somehow. He didn't approach me, just gave me this look I couldn't quite read. Anger, sadness, maybe a little bit of both. Then he turned and walked away. I keep telling myself I did what I had to do, that I spent too many years being made to feel worthless while doing all the real work, that he forced my hand by lying about me when I was trying to help him. Some days I'm absolutely certain I made the right choice. Other days I'm not so sure. Still, I can't help but ask, did I go too far by letting his carefully built facade crumble, even if it meant freeing myself from his control?